This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? And welcome to another edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Andrew Hustler Paterson with you, along with Michael Remis, and lots to get to coming off a disappointing loss last night at home for the Winnipeg Jets against the Vegas Golden Knights. Fun hockey game, though, and a lot of goals, which I'm sure doesn't make Rick Bowness very happy, but certainly was an exciting one in the rink last night, kind of turning on a couple of power plays each way late in the game. We'll go over all of that in a minute, hear from Rick Bowness, and also hear from Nikolai Ehlers, who joined Sarah Orlesky last night on the Winnipeg Jets post-game show on YouTube. And we'll play a little bit for you, but certainly a dejected Jets star forward who has missed all but 2 games this season and still has a long way back of recovery after his sports hernia surgery. Couple great guests to talk Jets with us today. Murat will join us a little bit later on in the program, and coming up in about 15 or so, we'll sit down with Trevor Kidd for a wide-ranging interview on a number of topics around the Jets, as well as a couple of crazy stories about injuries that he suffered during his NHL playing career. And a little later on, Alex Ovechkin hit 800 last night. Our good friend Stephen Whyno will pop on the program. We'll also let you know about the book that he's got out right now, just in time for the holidays, on emergency backup goaltenders in the National Hockey League. So let's get to it. Welcome to everyone in YouTube and podcast listeners. If you are able to, mark down a little, maybe a reminder on your phone, 2:45 p.m. registration opens for our qualifying race for the Marbles Tournament of Champions. We'll do it throughout this week and next week, and it's your chance to win Bomber season tickets courtesy of our friends at Consolidated Supply. So another marble race at the end of the program. Make sure to stick around. Join us on YouTube, and if you are listening to the audio version of the program, this week and next, if you can join us live at YouTube, on YouTube around 2:45, you'll have your chance to register and get in the mix for those Bomber season tickets. Hey, Consolidated Supply, we will drop the marbles a little later on. Big thanks to them. Coolbet Canada, Princess Auto, Not Auto Corp, Wallace & Wallace, Vita Health, Manitoba Battery, F Apparel, Royal Sports, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Little Brown Jug, Boston Pizza, Culligan Water, and of course, the great taste of Canada's favorite Canadian whiskey, Canadian Club. Let's get Remo in here to start things off. What's going on with you, my friend?
I'm just trying to figure out, do I shovel now or do I, wait for it all to fall? It's pretty snowy out there, Huss, and I don't know. You're always kind of down after a Jets loss, too, but I think with the way they've played, hey, it's only a 2-game losing streak. We're not in St. Louis Blues territory here, so.
Yeah, let's not even go there right now. Listen, there's a lot to unpack from last night's game. And we'll get to that in just a minute. But just quickly on that snow, this is maybe the most perfect snowball snow we've had in a long, long time right now. If you've got some kids, you just want to go and rip a few, this is a great time to do that. There's your Winnipeg Sports Talk PSA. Snowballs back and big time right now with this Colorado low coming in. It hasn't been too bad right now. Over the course of the night, and we got a few centimeters, I think, in some other areas of Manitoba and south of the border. It could very well be worse. All that being said, Remo, let's get to the game last night. Rick Bowness said that this was a statement game. He certainly wanted a big response from his club after a disappointing Sunday night against the Washington Capitals. And I think for the most part, he got that. I mean, a really good first 10 minutes, strong start for the Winnipeg Jets. They look good. But, man, I can't give enough credit to the Vegas Golden Knights, who, as we talked about yesterday on the program, were missing 3 of their top defensemen in last night's game and their star center, Jack Eichel. But man, was just a brilliant performance by Chandler Stevenson. I know we'll talk about Stone and Marchessault, who each popped a couple. To me, Chandler Stevenson at times put that team on his back, and was a huge part of the Vegas Golden Knights winning the game in a game that really turned on a couple power plays in the third period.
Yeah, I thought it maybe turned a little in the halfway through the first. It looked like the Jets got off to such a great start. You're up 1-0. Mark Scheifele scores, and then Vegas ties it up shortly after with the Mirmanov, the first of his NHL career. Nice little dangle there by Riley Smith on the zone entry, but that was a shot from distance, and you thought, maybe more often than not, Hellebuyck gets those, and you think you're going to head into the period, second period. You didn't play great in the second half of the first, and then 2 seconds left. Mark Stone. Just a really nice play by Stevenson to get the puck over to him. I still don't know how it managed to get there, but Stone buries it with 2 seconds left. And those goals at the end of the period, they're backbreakers. And I remember them happening pretty frequently to old Jets teams, dying ends of the first period. That's a tough one. But they managed to tie it up with Morgan Barron, and you want to see that stuff from the. He called out the bottom line, and Sam Gagner, helped them tie it up. But as you mentioned, it was the power plays in the fourth period. Marchessault, 2 power play goals, putting the end to the Jets there. So they were in it the whole night, but special teams, a bit of the difference. Golden Knights 2 for 3 on the power play. The Jets did get a very nice power play goal, and they almost had a second one too on that second power play. But Golden Knights were able to capitalize on their chances in the third.
Well, to me, that second power play, listen, this was not a goaltending clinic by any stretch of the imagination. We'll talk about that from a Jets perspective in a minute. And when you give up 5 goals, you're not often looking at a goaltender saying, man, he really was a difference maker. But my God, the saves that Adin Hill made on that power play in the third period when the Winnipeg Jets were ripping it around at will. The power play looked as good as it has had in a long time, Remo, but they just weren't able to beat Adin Hill. And it really, in a game like that, that's back and forth, it can come up with a big play on behalf of one player or a massive save. And he made a few of them to keep them at level. And then, of course, a late penalty that put the Vegas Golden Knights on the power play, and they made the most of it going forward. But I thought that was incredibly pivotal, the way Adin Hill really stood on his head for that 2-minute power play in the third period, allowed them to stay in the fight and obviously make the most of it when they got an opportunity in the final 5 minutes.
I got to say, I love how their power play is working with Connor and Scheifele at the dots and Morrissey at the top. Just how they skate around and create room, great offense, passing lanes. It was really awesome to watch, and it was too bad they didn't score on that one. They did score on their first power play. A beautiful pass from Connor to Scheifele. And the 2 penalties the Jets took in the third period. Wheeler with our favorite penalty, a puck over glass. I thought it maybe grazed it a little. They only showed the replay once, but they called it, and Marchessault scored. And I think that shot from the side, Hellebuyck would like to have back. And then Pionk with the high sticking penalty against Phil Kessel, who's going a bit on a breakaway there. So, those penalties, tough. They had a chance to tie it. The standout for the game for sure was he called out the fourth line, and Sam Gagner, you saw when he scored us how pumped he was. Yeah. Been healthy, scratched, in and out of the lineup. You get called out, but they want to see. And Stenny in his first game gets on the score sheet, so you have to think he's coming back.
Hey, I thought Stenlund was great last night. As far as a guy playing his first game, for the Jets in the National Hockey League, and the way that fourth line was challenged by head coach Rick Bowness, I thought he did himself quite a service last night with the way that he played, and I'd be surprised if he wasn't in the lineup. And we'll hear from Bones in a minute. Bones was quite complimentary of Stenlund. Gave Sam Gagner some props on, being in and around the net and making something happen. And then he said Gus was, quote, fine on left wing. I do wonder if David Gustafson could really use a goal or something really positive to happen right now. Listen, he's done a lot of the little things that, coaches, want players in that role to do. But man, they'd like to, he said he'd like to get a little bit more offense. As you mentioned, Stenlund got on the score sheet, but David Gustafson's still searching for his first goal this season. And I would say that, Thursday might be a great time to do that, to stay or get in the better books of head coach Rick Bowness. Now, we mentioned that Nikolai Ehlers also stopped by with Sarah Orlesky last night. We'll hear from that. But let's hear what Rick Bowness had to say about last night's game. Let's just start with number 9. Bones on the tough 6-5 loss last night at home to Vegas for this Winnipeg Jets.
I thought it was great. The first 10 minutes was really good. They took over the last 10 minutes of the first. They made more of their chances in the first half, or the second half of the first, than we did in the first half. But then as the game wore on, it was an even. Like they were a good hockey club. That was a hell of a hockey game, and give their goalie credit. That our last power play in the third, he made 4 just great A's. Give him credit for that. So that was a hell of a hockey game. It could have gone either way, and clearly. We battled hard. We showed we can certainly play with them, and with the best teams in the league, and we're going to continue to stay in that fight.
All right, so there's Rick Bowness, and I sort of concur with what Bones had to say. I mean, there was a big pushback, Reem, from the Golden Knights last night, and I mentioned, just how impressed I was with Chandler Stevenson. But Mark Stone was a beast last night. And the Marchessault line was really impactful, and they had to be, considering the guys they were missing on the blue line, and of course, Jack Eichel up front. I can't help but think, and I mean, I feel bad even saying this or bringing it up, and the coach certainly didn't go there last night. But let's be honest, and listen, we as Winnipeg Jet fans and people that follow this team have been spoiled because the bar has been set so freaking high by Connor Hellebuyck. But let's face it, Connor Hellebuyck didn't have one of his best games last night. And from the sounds of it, he was gone pronto after the game. And I imagine he was seething afterwards, knowing that that was a very winnable game. And the bottom line is, when the Jets score 5 goals, they win more often than not. And listen, if there's any guy in that dressing room that deserves a mulligan, it's Helly. But when you look back at last night's game, I think there was a couple that got through that don't normally, and that was a big part of the game as well, in addition to Aiden Hill stepping up and standing on his head in that key power play in the third period.
Yeah, I'll agree with you, Huss. You mentioned the Miramanov goal, maybe one of the Marchessault tying goal, just a shot from the side. You like to think if he could see it, he can stop it. At least he believes that. So, look, he's been stood on his head. He's the reason why they are there. He's still a Vezina candidate. He's allowed bad game, and I think we can say, look, he wasn't at his best, but doesn't mean he's a bad player. One player that was interesting in terms of ice time was Pierre-Luc Dubois. We noticed he had his shift skipped, got moved to the third line for a bit. Bones noted after the game, Huss, dealing with he's really sick. He said getting an IV after. Said other players are getting an IV. You have to wonder how much that affected the team as well, because it's been going around the city, Huss, here for a while.
Yeah, no, there's been a lot of people saying, why don't you play that clip? I believe it's number 7. And Bones was asked, I believe, by Weber after the game. I mean, where was Dubois at some points in that third period? There was a while where he wasn't out there. He did return towards the end of the game. But here's what Bones had to say about the PLD situation last night.
So, Rick, you skipped a couple rotations for Pierre-Luc. Was it something lacking in his game?
He's really sick.
Okay.
Yeah, he's under the weather.
Okay, thank you.
Big time, and there's a few other guys. We got a couple of guys on IV in there right now, so yeah.
Fair.
All right, so there's Rick Bowness on that situation. Let's get to 5 as well. Bones, listen, it wasn't at times there was pushes on both sides. I think there was a lot of positives that the Jets did, obviously sometimes in their own end, and they were off a little bit in their defensive structure. Here's what Bones had to say about that.
We're a little off on the losing that F3. Yeah, we are, and we're giving them too much time, and just a little bit out of sync with that. I'd like the D pinching when they shouldn't, and the forwards shouldn't be there. A little bit off there in the first. We've tightened that up in the second and third. I mean, one of their breaks in the first, we were shooting the puck and it hit the referee. It drops them and it takes off, so that's one of them. The other one, there was another one, they just purely outskated us. We had good position on them. They just outskated us. But yeah.
All right, so there's Rick Bowness, and I mean, as I mentioned, Chandler Stevenson, monster game last night, and really, really fast. We'll talk about that with Trevor Kidd coming up. There was a lot of talk about the fourth line, though. As I mentioned, David Gustafsson, Kevin Stenlund, and Sam Gagner were the unit last night as Axel Jonsson-Fjallby took a seat in the press box. And, of course, a waiver signing yesterday as well. Here's what Bowness had to say about his fourth line and the new addition to the roster.
I thought much better. I thought Kevin had a very strong game. Gags was around the net. Gus was fine on left wing, but I thought Kevin gave us what we needed him to do. He won some face-offs. He's a big, strong guy. Hung onto the puck. I really liked his game. That helped that line create some offense.
Talked a lot about competition among the forwards. Where does Carson Kuhlman fit into that mix?
Yeah, well, we're going to have to figure that out. I don't know a whole lot about him. I hear great things about his skating and his compete and everything else. So we'll have to. He's not getting in here until late tomorrow night. So we'll figure that out as we go along.
All right. So there's Rick Bowness after the game last night, certainly, and props to Bowness. Didn't even mention Hellebuck, and that's really the way it should be, in my opinion. I mean, we can sit here, talk about it, and we will talk about it a little bit with Trevor Kidd and what he saw, considering what he did for a living for all those years. But if there's, and listen, Rick Bowness has been pretty honest about the performance of his team when he has been asked. But nobody went there last night. No one will be more frustrated about the way that game turned out than 37. And he'll be back with a chip on his shoulder when the Predators come to town on Thursday night. We'll talk more about this Trevor Kidd in a minute. But one of the other things, Trevor, of course, was on the Jets postgame show last night with Sarah Orlesky, stepped aside as Nikolai Ehlers joined Sarah after the loss. And Nick, I'm sure, would love nothing more than to be out there with his teammates, but it has been a very, very trying season for the Dane. Played the first 2 games of the season and has been out ever since. Had surgery, is on the way back, but said right off the bat that it is no fun being out of the lineup and watching his teammates go to battle every night. Here's Nick Ehlers with Sarah.
It's been pretty much every single game since I've been out. It sucks. I've had quite a lot of injuries in the last couple of years, so it's not a lot of fun.
No one's surprised that was the take of Nikolai Ehlers, who usually is a pretty upbeat, bright guy, but this has been, I'm sure, one of the most trying times of his career. On a positive note, it sounds like he is getting better, but it certainly has taken some time. Here's what Ehlers had to say about where he's at right now.
Getting better every single day. So that's pretty exciting. It been very slow in the beginning, and obviously decided on doing surgery. So it's nice to finally be getting better and better and not kind of at a standstill, and that's exciting.
All right, so there's Nikolai Ehlers with sort of where he's at, and we see reports today that Nikolai Ehlers skated today, so that is great news, but as I said, there's still plenty of rehab to go. Here's Ehlers with a little bit more on his rehab and what's going on with him behind the scenes.
I'm doing a lot of things, pretty much everything, just not at the same weight that I'm usually doing it with. So that's pretty good, and like I said, I feel pretty good, and now it's just a matter of seeing how that goes on the ice.
All right. Well, as we mentioned, on the ice today, so I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions asked about that tomorrow. And, whenever they can get Rick Bowness or Kevin Cheveldayoff for somebody to speak on it, but it was great to hear from Nikolai Ehlers. That being said, this has been a trying time. You could feel it in his interview with Sarah last night. Here's one from Ehlers, just talking about the biggest challenge of what he's going through right now, hoping to get back in the lineup ASAP with the Winnipeg Jets.
It was mostly mentally. The first 5 weeks, from when I played my last game there, it was getting better, and then it kind of got stuck and it didn't really go anywhere, and I tried to skate and that didn't really work out. So not having a timeline at that point was pretty frustrating, and mentally really frustrating. But I think ever since the surgery, you have a timeline of what you can do at a certain time and when you can be expected back, and that changed my whole mindset and everything. So it's been exciting since the surgery. Let's put it that way.
Well, a couple smiles from Nikolai Ehlers, and you can feel that excitement. But Reem, this team misses him. The fan base misses him, and he'll be such a huge addition when he does come back. And maybe easier to hang on to, what he's going through right now or go through it, considering the success the team has had so far this season. That being said, this young man is a competitor, and you can tell how much he's missing, both being on the ice, contributing, and being really a part of the team.
Yeah, it's got to be tough. He played 2 games. He acknowledged that he struggled with injuries in the last couple of years. It's funny, I got all excited to see him on Jets TV with Sarah on the postgame yesterday, and it was just kind of depressing hearing him talk about how much it sucks to be injured. You can't be there with your teammates. He sat around for a month waiting for the injury to heal. It didn't. And now it seems like because he's had surgery, they have a more definitive timeline, and he's progressing more and more. And they did just tweet out a video 12 minutes ago of him on the ice today skating. He's going pretty slow, very gingerly, but he's doing some stick handling, taking some strides, and maybe he's back January or February. But you can see that it's got to be tough to not be there for your teammates when they're losing games here now back to back.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, we'll talk all about this, and we'll see what Trevor has to say. He, of course, made room in the seat for Nikolai Ehlers last night, as he was part of the Jets post-game coverage as well on YouTube right after the game. Gang, don't forget, if you popped in a little bit late, the Marbles Tournament of Champions continues. Our great friends and partners at Consolidated Supply have put up a pair of 2023 Bomber season tickets on the line, and your next chance to qualify is coming up at just after 2:45 p.m. today if you're with us live on YouTube. So stick around, and man, check out CTE.ca, Consolidated Supplies website, for everything that they've got, including an amazing selection of hot tubs, which might be a great addition to your operation as we get through these cold winter months. Nothing like a hot tub. I've often said there's 2 types of people in life, people with hot tubs and people without hot tubs. And if you have a hot tub, you've made it. And if you want to prove to yourself that you've made it or just enjoy the benefits of it, check it out. Spicy Joe, they've got some great hot tubs right now. Open to the public, 1395 Niagara Road East. And check out all their products and services right now, from golf carts to small engine parts. It's all there online at cte.ca. We are still looking forward to some holiday submissions for the Wallace & Wallace Unsung Hero. If you've been regularly listening to the program, you knew we announced our first Unsung Hero at the end of last week. And every one of those Unsung Heroes is going to win an autographed jersey from Josh Morrissey, who's part of this as well. Of course, Wallace & Wallace will be making a $500 donation to the Dream Factory each month on behalf of the nominator from WST listeners. And Josh and Margot Morrissey are going to be matching that as well. So it's just a great program. But we want to hear from you. Send us an email at unsunghero@winnipegsportstalk.com. Let us know about someone in your life, in your community, that's making a difference, whether it's through volunteering, whether it's through charity work, whether it's just through random acts of kindness done regularly in the community. Let us know about those people. We'll tell their stories, and we'll have another Unsung Hero with Wallace & Wallace and Josh Morrissey later on at the end of this month. Hey, it's snowy outside right now, but it's going to get cold again. Is your battery ready for it? Well, if it's not, or you're not sure, you need to talk to Donnie and the gang at Manitoba Battery down at 1026 Logan Avenue. If you're unsure, pop in. They'll do a quick test for you and let you know where you're at with that. But if you do know you need a battery, 2 things that we can guarantee you. You're going to save money and you're going to save time dealing with the gang over at Manitoba Battery. Why? Because they'll deliver it to you citywide the same day if you let them know by 3:00 p.m. Manitoba Battery is where you can shop local, get the best deals and the best prices in town on batteries of all shapes and sizes. And most importantly, don't take time out of your day, as they will bring it to you. Online at manitobabattery.com. Give them a call if you need, or you can always pop down and see them in person at 1026 Logan Avenue. And hey, just before we bring in Kidder, the holidays are here, and Vita Health Fresh Market is ready for it. So many great options to give the gift of health for your loved ones. Essential oils, candles, artisan soaps, bath bombs, lotions, chocolates, you name it. And they always have great prices on natural organic supplements, beauty products, and groceries, and the largest assortment of local products too. And listen, you're getting ready to entertain. You've got a big dinner coming up around Christmas. Pop by Vita Health Fresh Market for great selections of some of your favorite holiday food items like stuffing, cranberry sauce, non-alcoholic wines and drinks, which are great if you're entertaining as well. And you could also pre-order your Natural Free Run turkey in a store today. Vita Health Fresh Market, empowering people to lead healthy lives. 7 Winnipeg locations, including the newest store in Linden Ridge, and online at myvita.ca. Always a treat when we get to catch up with Trevor Kidd. Let's bring in the former NHLer now to get his thoughts on last night's game and more on the Winnipeg Jets. Kidder, great to have you back on the program. How are you, my friend?
All good. How are you? More importantly, recovered. I don't know how long you've been back in the motherland here, but I see you got your Canada soccer jersey on. Last time we spoke, you were in Qatar. So
yeah, it was amazing. I've been back for about a week and pretty much back onto regular North American time. Although I talked about this with a bunch of people at the game last night. I'm not sure whether I ever really got on Qatari time. I mean, we were doing the show at 10 p.m. The Jets games were at 4 a.m. I mean, it was a challenge, but yeah, it was an experience of a lifetime. And Trevor, let's get to last night. Sort of a game that we haven't seen too many times from the Winnipeg Jets this year. Listen, when the Jets score 5 goals, they win pretty much. But it was really back and forth. It had a little bit of everything. I mean, when you look back at last night's loss to the Vegas Golden Knights, what stands out to you about the Jets' performance?
boy, there was a lot there, and I said that to Sarah Lasky before we started the Jets TV last night. I'm like, where do you start with this game? There was, the Jets came out, and you almost got to back it up to the Washington game, which was a dud. You come out of that one, and Coach Bowness is saying this is a statement game against the Golden Knights, and a statement game within that. He wasn't impressed with what the bottom six, in particular the fourth line, was contributing on a nightly basis. So you have that coming in. The first 10 minutes of the hockey game, I thought was real good for the Winnipeg Jets. I thought they had some momentum. They had some offensive zone time. And then, Vegas kind of took over that hockey game. Some unfortunate bounces. Vegas scores at the end of that first period. But what really surprised me, kind of, the last 10 minutes of the first, certainly into the second period, Vegas is a fast team. Like, they are extreme. You think of the Winnipeg Jets and playing to their identity and whatnot, and we always talk about fast. Vegas, you could almost say, is another level of quickness. How many times did Stevenson for the Vegas Golden Knights either have a breakaway or a partial breakaway by creating an angle on a Winnipeg Jet defenseman from the top of the circles? So there was, I think, and I don't know if that caught Winnipeg by surprise. It certainly caught me by surprise in regards to how fast Vegas was. And I think a part of the system, you talked about Washington maybe having a game plan to play the Winnipeg Jets. I think Vegas had something similar, certainly in that first period. Into the second period, you saw them almost blowing the offensive zone. How many passes did you see from the breakout where, Winnipeg Jets are trying to defend so far up the ice? They're trying to defend the offensive blue line, really pinching off that support play that usually happens, that defenseman looking for that forward at the top of the circles along the boards. Last night, especially in that first period into the second, Vegas wasn't looking for that support play. They were passing it right into the neutral zone. And that's surprise. And that was a part of Stevenson having a breakaway. That was a part of some of that odd man rush stuff that you saw in the first period into the earlier second part of the hockey game. And Bowness mentioned it in his post game that they had to make an adjustment. And, he recognized or pointed out that third forward being perhaps not high enough in the defensive zone. I shouldn't say defensive, the offensive zone, to cover up some of those pinches in that neutral zone play. So, again, it was a different game. Vegas created a lot of, fancy offense, dynamic offense. I would say Winnipeg really didn't have that through 2 periods. Certainly some of the goals that you saw Winnipeg put in the back of the net there last night, I would say, are the gritty variety, the garbage type variety, and keeping it simple. I mean, point shots, right? I mean, you look at the power play goal in the first period by Winnipeg, that just bounces off of Scheifele in the front of the net. That's a point shot. You look at Barron's goal in the second period, Gagne's goal as well. Those are just putting pucks to the net and looking for a redirect. And some nights you have to do that. You have to keep it simple. You have to try and find those types of goals. So, Winnipeg looks at this game afterwards. Certainly you could maybe take a few positives from it. You saw some things out of that fourth line that was probably pretty good. You have to admire that they stayed in it. I mean, Winnipeg was down 2-1. They battle tie it back. They're down 3-2, battle tie it back. They actually get the lead. But, at the end, Vegas ultimately ties it up. Connor Hellebuyck, Huss, I mean, we were, speaking before, for as many games that he has been dialed in and a rock star, I would say he struggled a little bit last.
Yeah, let me ask you about Helly for last night, because as I said, I mean, I almost feel bad even bringing this up, considering how brilliant he's been.
Right.
And how many wins he's manufactured. But did you think he was off a little bit? I mean, what did you think about the goals that went in? Because it honestly did not look, and apparently Hilly got the hell out of there quickly afterwards. I'm sure, I would imagine that being the competitor he is, he wasn't too pleased with the way things went inside the Blue Print.
Yeah, you know what, there was, it was, I would say it would have been a tough night for him. Even you look at the first period goal there by, I think it was Mironov or Mironov, that's a wrister from, just above the top of the circles. Usually we see Hellebuyck stop those type of plays. You look at the goal at the end of the first period, I thought that was arguably the toughest one for him. That's, Haig had a pretty easygoing point shot that the rebound control, again, Hellebuyck is showing to me, that he is really dialed in, his vision, his tracking of the puck. That's a puck you want to smother into your chest protector, or certainly, using your peripheral type vision, realizing Stone is going to be coming from the right, which he was, that you put that rebound, either you smash it out into the high slot with only a couple seconds later, you put it into your guts and freeze it, or you put it into a corner, but just to kind of haphazardly put it 2 or 3 feet in front of you, that's not the Connor Hellebuyck that we're used to seeing, right? You could say Marchessault's one of his 2 goals there, the one at least from the high top of the circle area that somehow found some space there in his blocker side. That is a shot that he'd probably like back. So, of the half dozen or so that Vegas scored, there's probably 3 in there that Connor Hellebuyck, you mentioned it, how big of a competitor he is, that he'd love to have back.
It's funny, and I've loved watching Rick Bowness operate all season long. It's been so interesting listening to him talk very openly and honestly about what happened in the game. The one thing, he didn't go there last night. I mean, there really was no mention of the goaltending, and I think it's because it was somewhat obvious, but at the same time, there's a level of respect and appreciation for what this guy's done all season long, and I think people saw it, and it wasn't worth talking about, certainly from the head coach's perspective.
No, I agree with you. And I mean, and that's true, because we haven't seen for the last month or so, I can't even count how many 5-2 hockey games there's been. And, certainly within those games, Connor Hellebuyck has been brilliant. The game last night, we haven't seen it, where there's this battle where Vegas is creating dynamic offense. Winnipeg's battling to, create any sort of offense, and they're somehow finding it, battling through and getting some garbage goals, as I mentioned. And this thing came down to the last couple minutes, and Vegas came out on top. So I think high level would be frustrating, because there was something, I think, to be said about the statement game. And there's a lot of banter talk about some of the competition Winnipeg has had for the last couple of weeks and where they are in the standings. And now they're going to start getting some games here that are maybe tougher caliber, Washington being one of those teams, Vegas being another. And they've come out on the short end of the stick here in both of them. But think it's important to not, push the panic button here. The Winnipeg Jets, I think their identity, the structure, this character, how they're playing, it's a long season, and they have proven, I think, to some degree here, whether it be the one-goal hockey games. I know last night it didn't work out, but coming back in those games where they've lost one, they haven't allowed things to, let's say, snowball when it hasn't gone well. With that being said, now you have to look forward now, then put this one behind you as fast as possible. And, you got the Preds here, tomorrow night. The other part of it too, which was interesting, and we noticed it in the press box there last night, Dubois didn't have a couple shifts there in the second period. And it was asked about that post game with Rick Bowness in how sick he was. That he had to take a couple shifts off because he simply couldn't go out there because he was so under the weather. And then to say that there's also a couple, 3 other guys that were getting the IV drip because they weren't feeling well as well. So, again, not to make excuses, but if you're the team there, you're the group, you're the coaching staff, a statement game, you want to have as many guys healthy as possible. And you're putting bodies out there that perhaps shouldn't be out there because of illness or otherwise. Again, there's, I'm sure they're looking forward to putting some of that behind them, getting healthy again and getting ready for tomorrow night.
No doubt about that. I mean, listen, and Vegas was banged up. I mean, they were missing the entire right side of their blue line.
Give them credit. Yes, you're right.
Well, and I was wondering what they would look like last night. I mean, I thought the Jets were in an advantageous situation going into the game, which I think we'd all agree that they were.
Mm-hmm.
I know Eichel. And obviously the guys on the blue line. I mean, you had Nick Hague and Martinez play a ton last night.
Yeah.
But you mentioned his name earlier. Chandler Stevenson had a game last night. I mean, listen, you know what Mark Stone's going to bring all the time in the Marchessault line. But I couldn't believe how impactful Chandler Stevenson was. And I know they gave the stars to the guys that got a couple goals. His 4-assist performance was incredible. And I think it was Drew Mandel that tweeted out last night, to think that the Vegas Golden Knights got that guy for a 5th-round pick and the impact that he's having right now. I mean, he really put, at times, that team on his back last night, Trevor, and it's a big reason why Vegas escaped with 2 points.
Totally agree. He made an impression. Again, I was surprised. And you touched on it, Vegas and what they had missing last night. I thought this was totally in the Winnipeg Jets' hands in regards to the game. Having 3 of your best, what was it, White Cloud, Theodore, and Pietrangelo out, plus Eichel up front. I mean, those are 4 core guys. Imagine, you talk about the Winnipeg Jets, take out the 4 Winnipeg Jet best players and on the back end. And what are you looking at? Vegas didn't skip a beat last night with what they had out of the lineup, which was really surprising. And a huge part of it, as you mentioned, was Stevenson. They're a quick team. They play quick. They played quick in getting the puck out. They played real quick through the neutral zone. And you saw what their speed can do with some of the chances they created. And you mentioned it there, Stevenson. There was a few times there where I thought the Winnipeg Jets had him shut down, even with having a bit of call it a half step on some of the Winnipeg. I think of Schmidt there a few times. I think he was surprised by the speed and just getting that angle. And then all of a sudden, he has it. He's passed and he's in on Connor Hellebuyck all alone. Connor Hellebuyck, even with giving up what he had and having a tough night, he made a lot of big stops on breakaways and partial breakaways through 40 minutes there in that game.
Well, and you know who else did? Was Aiden Hill in the other net. Now, I mean, you're not going to look at, letting in 5 and say this was a masterful performance. But I think Rick Bowness touched on it
and the
afterwards.
Power play there at the end, yes.
The power play at the end. I mean, that, and it's so interesting, in these close games, Trevor, and I'll suggest that the Washington game on Sunday was very much like this. Special teams can come down to absolutely being the difference. And, for a guy that, obviously had a few get past him earlier on, they were in the game. And the way he stepped up on that power play, I mean, the Jets were moving it around like the Harlem Globetrotters at times. And I mean, there was like 4 grade A chances that Hill stopped. And sometimes it can be one power play, 1 minute where a guy steps up and it can really be the difference between winning and losing. And I thought Aiden Hill despite what had happened in the previous 55 minutes, was there when his team really needed him.
Well, and that was, you could say that was the difference, right? Because both goaltenders probably had situations, games that they'd like to have back. And this probably for both of them would be something like that, right? And it came down to the last 5 minutes. You mentioned it. Hill made a couple big stops on Winnipeg's power play, and Connor Hellebuyck probably had a couple there, and certainly in that third period that he'd like to have back. And it kind of came down to, you like to say last shot wins, but in this instance, it was, kind of last save, and who came up with the biggest saves there late in the third period. And Vegas and Hill won that battle. But I'd still nonetheless take Connor Hellebuyck. If there was a redo of the situation, my money's still on Connor Hellebuyck.
Yeah, something tells me 37 will be ready to go on Thursday night, and he'll have a bit of a bee in his bonnet. Trevor Kidd's with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. One other guy I wanted to ask you about last night was Kevin Stenlund. Big body. He was impactful on that fourth line. Put it this way, I don't think he did himself any disservice with the way that he played last night. And from hearing the coach afterwards, I think we'll probably see another few games of an audition for the big guy.
Yeah, don't disagree. That was a lot of the talk, conversation up in the press box from the Winnipeg Jet perspective. Just what you just said, Huss. Big guy, tried to play the physical game. And with that, I think he had I think more quickness. We mentioned Stevenson and what he was doing for Vegas. I don't want to say it was that type of quickness, but certainly made a nice contribution there on that fourth line. It was impactful. It had some moments. They had some offensive zone time. They created some things off of board battles, which you like to see, and they really didn't give up anything defensively. So it was a great first impression. I agree with you, and certainly we'll see him again.
Trev, of course, you were part of the Jets post game afterwards with Sarah Orlesky, and Nikolai Ehlers popped by. Hard not to feel the frustration that Nick's having right now. I mean, what a tough situation that young man's in, and it is killing him, I think, to see his team go out late on the line the way they are right now. And it's a helpless feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, no, he was gracious enough to give Sarah and the program some time after the game. So we're obviously very thankful for that. But yeah, you could certainly see that there isn't a lot of excitement in his voice. Past a comment about that he hopefully is very soon to be on the ice. Again, you'd almost say it was a bit of a doldrums, frustrating type conversation tone that he had for the call it 5 minutes with Sarah on the program. And I get a lot of it. He's talked about last couple of years and injuries and certainly this year only playing 2 games. It has to kill him though. I guess he could his tone could be defensible in regards to here's a guy that sees his team as a big part of that core 6 up front for the Winnipeg Jets, and they've gotten out of the gates here so well, and to be on the sidelines watching your comrades, your teammates doing the good things that they're doing, it would have to be frustrating. So, and a part of that too with his injury, there was a bit of an unknown part there, and that part, would drive any high-end athlete, crazy, scratching your eyeballs out, pulling your hair out, not knowing, where that finish line is, where that line is in the sand is, to being back and competing with your group, and for 2 points, and being a part of again the good things that the Winnipeg Jets are doing. So there was something to be said, and a few of the things you could maybe kind of take a couple. Again, the interview I wouldn't have viewed as overly positive, but if you were to try and pick a few positive pieces out of it, I think the fact that he's going to be on the ice very soon. And then there was another comment where he talked about at least knowing where he's at, right? The surgery kind of it gave him a timeline for getting back, and certainly that, by the sounds of it, means a lot. Now, that injury that he has, though, Huss, like, I mean, it was talked about, surgery 6 weeks. A broken bone is one thing, but that especially a guy with his speed and how he plays the game, that hip surgery that he has, like, you want to play that with a little bit of caution. So, I mean, you talk about 6 weeks. I wouldn't be surprised if this thing's closer to 8 weeks. If this thing becomes nagging, you'll never get rid of it. Never mind this year. You'll never get rid of it for the rest of your career. So I imagine there's going to be some, trying to hold Nick Ehlers back a little bit in regards to when he is officially ready to go, just to make extra cautious, extra sure on where they're at. But again, a lot of the conversation, this is to me, you look at this team, the clock is ticking, right? So here's, with the lineup that they have, the players that they have, contracts, with the year that they're having, what's the window for the Winnipeg Jets here? And we could get into another conversation where, Nick Ehlers is a part of that, where if they keep going the way they are, what's the trade look like? What's the help look like? What's the window here is closing with some of the personnel that they have and the impact that they're having this year. This whole thing becomes an interesting, even further conversation when it comes to, bodies that are injured, help, and you see them real tinkering with players and waiver wires and trying to plug and play on that third and fourth lines. This is going to be interesting as we get going here in regards to, Kevin Cheveldayoff, what he might do with that top six and perhaps making a bigger move at some point in time.
Well, for sure. I mean, like, it's twofold, right? First of all, the window is this year. I mean, they got to have the best possible season, and then they got some huge decisions to make next summer, because I don't think the Winnipeg Jets are in the business of letting any of those top players leave for nothing. I mean, maybe a player like Mark Scheifele, if there's a question that maybe he stays, maybe he goes, he's so important he keeps it. But Hellebuck, Dubois, you got to figure that out this summer. Those guys are too important to have walk at the end of the next season. But it compounds things for the GM, because first of all, and we've talked about, like, if Nick Ehlers comes back healthy in a month or two, I mean, that is as impactful a player returning to the lineup as you'll get in pretty much any trade. But at the same time, I think with what's happened, I'm not sure that they can totally count on that right now. And it certainly does put some pressure on the GM. Let me just quickly ask you about being injured. Different coaches handle things in different ways. I've heard some coaches, like, if you're injured, you're away from the team right now. Like, just, you're going to handle, you'll be with the trainers. I'm working with the guys that are with us. Others, and I'm sure the Jets are like this, trying to, because you could feel the mental strain for Nick last night, in that interview. And, feeling you're a part of it is probably a real challenge. And I'm sure Rick Bowness, I mean, we've heard so many things about the way Rick treats his players. I imagine they're doing everything, but I'm sure over the course of your career, you saw some coaches that handled injured players very differently.
Yeah, you know what, Huss? Mostly with the coaches that I had, trainers that I had, and to me, the biggest differentiating factor here is wanting to be around the group is home games versus being on the road with the fellas. I mean, home games, guys are coming to the rink. They're getting their work in. They're doing what they have to do, whether it be an injury or preparing for the next game. But then everyone's going, home to their families, right? So your window coming down to the rink, doing your prep, whether it be working out, riding the bike afterward, getting your treatment, call that a 5-hour window. And then again, as I mentioned, it's home, pick up the kids from school, make dinner with the wife, get the kids off, whatever their activities are. Like, you live a pretty normal life in that regard. So if you're an injured guy, you're certainly a part of the group from a treatment in the training room. But to me, the part as an injured guy, you start is you miss some of the road stuff, right? You miss the banter, you miss the plane rides, you miss the dinners with the boys, you miss that secondary family component, and that's usually developed on the road when you're hanging out, you're going for dinners, it might be a movie, whatever that might be. that's the part you start to miss when you're injured, when you're out for a long period of time, is you just can't wait to get back and be in that dressing room. And certainly there's a part, as I mentioned, when you're at home, but it's the stuff on the road that you start to, where you miss the guys, the family component, the banter, as I mentioned, the laughs, and getting the battles that are associated with that.
Well, I mean, I'm sure there's a real feel of missing out, especially when the team's playing the way that it's played so far this year. Hey, before we go, you were pretty healthy pretty much through your entire career. No, did you have any significant injuries or anything that kept you out for a long period of time?
I only had one. Well, I got two injuries, and both of them would probably take a little bit of time. I broke my leg in Atlanta. Crazy story. Broke my leg in Atlanta. Calgary sent me down my first year pro, sent me down to Salt Lake, and kind of said I'd only be down there for a couple, 3 months. We're in Atlanta playing, and they were trying out new moorings for the nets. And I forget what Atlanta player came down and basically somehow tripped up before he got to the hash marks. He's on a breakaway. So he basically loses his balance, trips up, crashes into me. In that crash, I'm down on my side. The net doesn't come off its mooring. My leg gets caught on it. I break my fib tip. And so they have to cut my gear off. So Glenn Hall, the Hall of Famer Glenn Hall, is the goalie coach. He's actually in Atlanta. So they carry me off on a stretcher. Glenn Hall is in the back room. He's actually cutting my pads off to get me, into the ambulance. Spend the night in a downtown Atlanta hospital. The fun part of this story is, no one does anything. Put my leg in a huge cast and get on the plane. 2 first-class tickets with my leg is in a right to the hip. So I need 2 seats. So everyone's loading onto the plane. I'm in first class. My leg's taking up a seat. Well, guess what? Whose seat I'm taking up? All of a sudden, this monster of a dude walks onto the plane, and it's Jaws from James Bond. And my leg is in his seat.
Come on.
It was nuts. So he's taking up the whole front of the airplane, the aisle. I mean, this guy is huge. He bends over, his back is touching the top of the plane, right? And so there's a whole scene at the front of the plane, what to do. Finally, there's a guest that's behind me that elects to go, they're giving people the moon here. Okay, we need to figure this out. Jaws is not going back into economy. Someone here in first class is going to have to move to the back. So the guy behind me moves to the back, and I'm sure they gave him a boatload of credits and whatnot to fly again. But it turned out this guy knew nothing about hockey, and he was flying. I went Atlanta, Salt Lake, Calgary. For the 2-hour flight to Salt Lake City, he chewed my ear off. Jaws chewed my ear off, wanting to know about hockey. Had no idea, but loved it. Was a super fun guy. So I had that injury, and then I had another crazy one with my shoulder. I had my shoulder destroyed, pulled out of its socket during a All-Stars local skills competition.
Come on, the skills comp?
Yeah, no, they changed the rules because of it. It was, and this is how ridiculous this. It was a breakaway competition time, 30 seconds, 5 pucks. So you had 30 seconds, you had 5 breakaways. So if you did those 5 breakaways, and there is still time left on the clock, you could play any loose puck that was available. No, it's crazy. So Peter Worrell, who was our tough guy, they elected him to do the breakaway contest. There was a few of them. So he does his 5 breakaways. I don't think I'm going to go with he didn't score on any of them. But as soon as he was done, there was about 5 seconds left on the clock. There was a puck. So just picture me sitting in the crease. He's come down, he's taking a breakaway. I would say I'm right center in my net. Well, there's a puck that is laying behind me to my left. So he takes that last shot. sees now that there's a puck behind me to my left. He goes to shoot it. Well, I reach over with my blocker hand to stop him. And that 1 second of time where I reach over to basically grab his hockey stick, he goes to one-time this puck into the back of the net and pulls my shoulder right out of its socket.
Oh, skills competition injury.
Skills competition. And so they had to put the old towel underneath it and pull it back in. And Florida ended up trading. I came back that season, but Florida was really nervous about it. And Brian Murray at the time, him and Chuck Fletcher, they ended up trading for Mike Vernon just for some security. And it was unfortunate because I was at that time, I think my record was 14-2. And we were off to the races, certainly as a team. We had a great team there in Florida. And, I was probably about 2 weeks away from being named to the All-Star team. And that didn't happen as well. So every time I see those local skills, and in Winnipeg, the Jets were advertising this last night, Huss.
It's coming up on the 4th of January.
Yeah. I cringe. And I know Connor Hellebuck, the goalies don't do the things that I did, but I think of those, the races that they do, the timed races around the net. And, oh boy, you mentioned Nick Ehlers, some of the players they put in those, Kyle Connor, your core top 6 guys are going, hell-bent for leather. And it only takes, or especially when they're wheeling around the net, to blow a wheel, crash into the boards, boom, done for the season. I think those skills are the craziest thing when you think about it, the amount of money that is on the ice, $70-80 million. Never mind what that means if one of those guys go out and your chances of making the playoffs. I think it's the most ridiculous. The amount of public relation things you could do as a team to have the same type of impact. Go visit a hospital, go, a shelter, something like that. You'd get way more out of it than trying to sacrifice your guys in that type of environment.
Yeah, listen, I'm just going to be on pins and needles now watching the skills competition on the 4th of January, hoping that the Jets get through it. Kidder, this has been so much fun, man. You have a great Christmas. Actually, I'll see you Thursday night, tomorrow night for Hockey Helps the Homeless. I know you're going to be involved in that. I'll be emceeing the event, so I'll look forward to seeing you there. Great to see you're involved with that again. It should be an awesome event. This is a great convo, man. Thanks for doing this.
Cool, man. Thanks for having me again.
All right, great stuff. Great stuff with Trevor Kidd. The Jaws story in First Class was just an all-timer. And yes, there will be. I'm sure there's many nervous moments for people, especially in management, coaching, when it comes to the skills competition. But I'm sure they make it as safe as possible. But man, what a way to suffer one of only 2 significant injuries in your entire playing career. Great stuff with Trevor Kidd. And yes, Kid's going to be at Hockey Helps the Homeless tomorrow. Shout out to everyone and all the companies and people that raised money for Hockey Helps the Homeless. It'll be in the event on Friday. Sure, we'll have some good stories to come out of tomorrow night's festivities, which is actually at the Met right across the street from the rink, where the Jets will be taking on the Nashville Predators. We'll talk more Jets. Last night's game, a look ahead to a big divisional matchup tomorrow at home with Murat coming up in just a few minutes. I have to give a big thanks to our friends at Not Auto Corp for their great support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. And folks, if you've been out on the roads today and you don't have winter tires, you got to ask yourself, what are you waiting for? And listen, Not can help you out, because not only do they have winter tire specials, but they've also got the MPI payment plan. So really, the question to ask yourself is, why not get safe winter tires now for you and your family and pay later with the MPI payment plan? Of course, if you're looking for a new vehicle or considering an upgrade, head on down to Not. They've got an amazing consignment program for the vehicle you have right now. And of course, they'll find you the car that you're looking for, source it, get it here to Winnipeg, and get you into it at the best possible price. Why not get into the car of your dreams at Not Auto Corp? Waverly and McGillivray, and online at not.ca. Folks, if you haven't done all your Christmas shopping yet, may I suggest you get your butt down to Royal Sports and take care of everything you could possibly need for the sports fan in the family. You've got Jets gear. You've got the new retro reverse jersey. Saw a bunch of those last night at the game. Man, those are sweet. Tons of Winnipeg Blue Bomber merchandise, not to mention all of your favorite teams from the NHL, the National Football League, Major League Baseball, Raptors and NBA, and of course, international soccer as well, with great World Cup kits for the soccer fan in the family. And not to mention the full line of new Winnipeg Sports Talk hats. Now, we've got them up at the site if you're not able to get to Royal, but if you are out and about, all new 6 versions of the WST hats, including that bomber themed blue and gold wordmark hat, all available right now at Royal Sports. And again, you can always check out our site as well at winnipegsportstalk.com, Royal Sports 750 Pembina Highway, and make sure to follow them on Instagram at Royal Sports Pembina for the latest merchandise drops, sale information, and some amazing gift ideas like all of the incredible Yeti products in their massive Yeti section at the show. And hey, going into 2023, never mind the holidays right now, many of you are probably thinking about maybe upgrading your wardrobe. And hey, this is a great time to maybe give a little nudge to that person in your life and let them know about that, because right now, get a $100 gift card, which will turn into $115 at F Apparel. And you can use it for anything: men's accessories, chinos, golf pants, and of course, custom suits beginning at just $400. And as we get into 2023, for all those of you planning weddings or grads, talk to the guys at F about their great specials for both wedding parties and 2023 grads. F Apparel's at 190 Smith Street downtown, and online, you can make an appointment as well at F. That's EPHapparel.com. Hey, stay tuned, folks. We have an AEW pre-sale code for you, which will drop a little bit later on before we get into marbles. Stephen Whyno coming up as well. But right now, let's welcome in Murat of The Athletic for his weekly visit. Murat, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing just fine. How are things in your world?
Well, they're good. I mean, listen, I was obviously left the building a little disappointed last night. Fun game. I mean, lots of goals, and that's, obviously what you look for. But, man, I couldn't help but feel it was a missed opportunity for the Winnipeg Jets, considering, what Vegas was missing, on the blue line, no Jack Eichel. But man, I'll be honest, I was so impressed with Chandler Stevenson, Mark Stone, the Marchessault line. I mean, not a lot of quit. There's a lot of teams that might have just said, hey, this is a real tough spot for us. That was not the case. And the Vegas Golden Knights showed, even in a depleted state last night, why they're the number 1 team in the West right now.
Yeah, it was a tough game for Winnipeg, and partly because of the quality of the Vegas Golden Knights, even injured as they are. I mean, their entire right side missing with Pietrangelo, with Shea Theodore, with Zach Whitecloud, the Manitoban, I got to acknowledge that. And presumably Winnipeg was in a position to take advantage of a beaten up Vegas Golden Knights team. But like you, I was impressed. Mark Stone, impressed by him always. The amount of pucks he knocks down in the neutral zone. Obviously, he had the 2 goals as well. But for me, a player who I'm not, I've seen, of course, but who I'm not as familiar with was Chandler Stevenson, whose speed really, I thought, caused problems for Winnipeg. And then Marchessault, who Winnipeg has loved to hate since that 2018 playoff series where he was always tracking back on Jets players and taking pucks and scoring. It was it was a nice game from him as well. And even after all of that, Hustler, I feel those first 2 games Winnipeg played against the Vegas Golden Knights were a dominant team. And of course, it had all of its healthy players. Eichel was in the lineup, and those defensemen were in the lineup too. I thought Winnipeg got pushed around. Last night, I thought Winnipeg created most of its own problems. As good as Vegas is, and credit to them for burying the chances they got, I thought Winnipeg made its own life a lot more difficult than it needed to do last night.
Well, I agree, and so did Rick Bowness after the game. I mean, I think he liked it. Well, he said as much. I mean, liked the way the team came out. They had a great first 10 minutes. Vegas, to their credit, really pushed back, and of course had that backbreaker of a goal late in the first period. But it was interesting how the Vegas Golden Knights were prepared for what the Jets were bringing, and you saw those passes right through into the neutral zone instead of the breakouts as you normally have. And it was the speed of Vegas, in particularly Chandler Stevenson, that really created some serious problems for Winnipeg on the back end. What did you think about how the game progressed and the coaching adjustments that Rick Bowness made for his club against what Vegas was bringing?
Yeah, I mean, great point on the speed through the neutral zone. I think that's an area where Winnipeg has generally had success when it's been winning, is limiting team speed coming into the neutral zone to get into Winnipeg's end and do something productive with it. And that's because the forecheck has usually been dialed in. The pressure has been right. The aggression has been there. Defensemen only pinch when there's coverage, and they get that coverage. And last night, what I found was looking down from the press box view, where the game looks a lot easier than it actually is, the X's and O's were missing. The forecheck wasn't as engaged. You couldn't figure out, just looking down on where the Jets were playing, on what shape they were trying to run through the neutral zone. Was it a 2-1-2? Was it a 1-3? Was it like, what was happening? And I think the key reason for that is how well Vegas moved the puck, or one key reason was that. And whereas Washington, I thought, sold the threat of a stretch pass a few times, but what they did was they played a pass shorter into the neutral zone and just used that space to back off Jets defensemen. I thought Vegas had really a lot of success with stretch passes early on, and they were able to find their outlets pretty high up the ice in attack, and that created a lot of trouble. Vegas's first goal was an entry that, a free entry at the blue line. Josh Morrissey is the only one defending because there's a pinch and nobody's covering. None of the forwards are covering. So that was trouble. Wheeler's stepping on the puck, and then Lowry and Neil Pionk being slow to get to the rebound that Stone buries with, 1.6 seconds left in the first period. That was really tough as well. And yeah, give credit to the Winnipeg Jets for pushing back and creating a game out of a situation where that backbreaker of a goal could have taken the air right out of them.
Yeah, I'm with you. I know that I believe the Stars, they gave, the guys that scored 2 goals, Marchessault and Stone, the nod. And of course, we'll get to Mark Scheifele in a minute. But to me, Chandler Stevenson was the best player on the ice last night and was the difference maker for the Vegas Golden Knights. It had to be the most anticlimactic hat trick in NHL history, the way that went down. Mark Scheifele did get the third late as the team had already given up the empty netter. But overall, another really strong game for Mark Scheifele, and they really needed him considering what we learned about Pierre-Luc Dubois after the game from Rick Bowness.
Yeah, imagine that. Pierre-Luc Dubois, according to Rick Bowness, incredibly ill during the game. It was on an IV afterwards and was not the only one to hear Rick Bowness talk about it. So I don't know if that's necessarily the flu or what have you. Clearly, if it were COVID, the team would have handled that in a different way. That those players wouldn't be part of the team. But that was a bit of a stunning statement. And it also, I guess, it reflected some of the chaos in Winnipeg's game. I think just maybe it's revisionist history on my part, but there were players running into each other. Dubois and Connor crashed into each other. I think it was DeMello and I'm not sure if it was Morrissey, but there was a couple of combinations of Winnipeg Jets just so out of sync that they were literally crashing into each other. And I wondered if the giveaways, all that other sort of stuff was, just maybe being ill in some cases, one way or the other. To stay in a game like that, you need a big performance from your other players. And Mark Scheifele, good point by you. One of the least celebrated hat tricks ever. The chances of coming back to win that game with, I think, 1.7 seconds in that case, they adjusted the clock after he scored. And one of the signs of that was we didn't ask him about the hat trick. We didn't ask him about his goals after the game. It was really about the way that the overall game had went. And maybe those few fans who'd thrown hats onto the ice when they thought Mark Stone had scored his third goal, but it was actually Marcia. So maybe there just weren't any hats left on heads at that point.
Yeah, either that or people had headed to the exits after the empty netter that put the Vegas Golden Knights up 6-4. We talked a lot about the way that the game, it was back and forth, and there was lead changes in the third period, Murat. We were just talking to Trevor Kidd. I thought that sequence when the Jets were on the power play in the third period, Aiden Hill, this was not a goaltending clinic by any stretch of the imagination on either side, but man, he made some huge saves when his team really needed to keep it in. And that gave the Vegas Golden Knights the opportunity to take advantage of their power play opportunity at the end. As good as Hill was at the clutch time in the game, and I hate to even bring this up because this guy has been the Jets' best player for so long. It's safe to say that was not vintage Connor Hellebuyck last night. And I'd say 90% of the time, if you get a normal Hellebuyck performance, the Jets are probably winning comfortably with 5 goals.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, credit to Hill. I agree with that power play situation for Winnipeg towards the end. Hellebuyck, that was not a strong game. And, certainly any team that gets 5 on him, he's going to be frustrated. He's going to be upset by that. And I just go through the goals kind of, one at a time in a way. The Miramanov goal, which is a wrist shot from the point, I don't know from Hellebuyck's point of view, from that angle, if he loses that puck coming through, I think it's Blake Wheeler's body at the point. But that's a save Hellebuyck makes most of the time. I don't think it was a rocket. And I think that the Hellebuyck that we know usually finds a way to stop that puck, even if he picks it up a little bit late. When Wheeler stepped on the puck, okay, that's chaos. Vegas was able to get a productive rebound off of Hellebuyck. And I thought that there were a few rebounds that you wouldn't have liked last night. The Schmidt giveaway, where Hellebuyck's left to deal with the 2-on-1 and Schmidt's tracking back, Mark Stone eventually scores the goal. Just the way that the play breaks down for a moment, that cross-crease pass, it looks like Hellebuyck should have a play on just stopping the pass dead. And he looks to be off balance as he's sort of tracking the puck across. I don't know if he would see those individual moments the exact same way, but, it wasn't vintage Connor Hellebuyck in terms of being able to steal a game like he almost did when he made, 41 of 43 saves, I think it was, in that overtime spectacular where Jack Eichel won the Game 2 match of these two teams' series. If Hellebuyck had played that night, Winnipeg would have walked away with that.
Yeah, well, I'll say this. I expect a big bounce-back performance from Hellebuyck on Thursday. If there's anything we've learned about him, and from accounts, he was hot, got the hell out of there afterwards. I'm sure he came to the rink today, if he did, and completely focused on tomorrow. And as I said, if there's anyone that gets a pass or gets a mulligan, and interesting, Rick Bowness didn't mention it at all, and I kind of like that, because as much as he's been up front and center, with fans and media about what has been issues, even if it was a down game for Connor Hellebuyck, he wasn't going to publicly hang that one on him. All that being said, missed opportunity for the Jets to, prevent themselves from losing 2 for the second time in a row. And it brings us to a pretty interesting game coming up tomorrow night against the Nashville Predators, who I would think, Murat, come into this game thinking that this is one that they simply have to have. They got lit up last night by the Edmonton Oilers. Oilers have just dominated Nashville this season and in the past. I think Leon Draisaitl has 10 points now in 2 games against the Preds this year. But, man, when you look at where the Preds are right now in that middle of the Central Division, being pushed by the likes of Minnesota and St. Louis, you're going to have an ornery team at home that, has lost 2 in a row for the second time all season long. I think we're also going to see a visiting team that realizes the importance of that game tomorrow night at Canada Life Center.
Yeah, I think that one of the storylines with Winnipeg playing so well through most of the season, and remember, last week we were here talking about how good the Winnipeg Jets were, that they'd arrived, and you asked me, what do you need to see from them? What's the next step? And I'm like, just keep it up, really. I think my answer was, I just need to see it for long stretches before I believe in it wholeheartedly. And for the Winnipeg Jets to be coming off of 2 relatively poor performances, admittedly against some of the league's very best teams, so they have a lot to do with that as well. But these haven't been vintage Winnipeg Jets performances, at least of this season. To be running into the Nashville Predators now, who have their own reasons to be ornery and upset, I think for me, the story of the Central Division is that it's not even remotely won at this stage. Even with Winnipeg in the lead, points percentage-wise, all those sorts of things, you like how Winnipeg has played. Nashville will have its own words to say about this season. Dallas will have its own words to say, St. Louis too. And I think everybody involved knows that at some point the Colorado Avalanche, are going to return to full health. So every single one of these games is a massive tilt. Every single one of them. It's something Winnipeg has been able to do relatively well so far, is clean up against the division. And if it's going to stay towards the top of the division, it absolutely has to do it all over again against Nashville.
Well, one thing they can lean on is a great record in the division. That's maybe one of the biggest reasons why the Jets find themselves in the lofty spot that they're on right now. All that being said, I think they were 10-2, if I'm not mistaken, coming into this homestand with another game against Nashville going forward. It's great to bank those points, but these games are massive, and I think for a team. I mean, the last thing you want to do is have nothing to show for a 3-game homestand after how well the team had played in the month and the last road trip heading into getting back home for some home cooking.
Yeah, I mean, that would just be a shot to the pride more than anything. I think to go onto that back-to-back and get 4 points last week and arrive home with a little bit of swagger and some belief, and maybe even the opportunity to have, they wouldn't have caught up to Vegas with the win last night, but had they been able to keep the winning going against Vegas and Washington, look out. Well, to then, if they were to manage to go 0-3 on this homestand, now the headlines start turning a little bit, and now it's, well, did we overrate these Winnipeg Jets? Did they get too high on their own belief in themselves based off of some early returns in a very long season? And I know that, most of the time it's wise to zoom out and say, okay, they're a pretty good team playing pretty well and all those sorts of things. But this is and remains a massive season for the Winnipeg Jets. We've talked to the context heading into it to death, but it can't just be a story of how Bowness helped propel them to a tremendous record in the month of November. If it ends here, I think there's going to be a lot of consternation in Winnipeg, and the sooner they can get out of this, now it's a 2-game streak. I don't know if 2 games constitutes a streak, but the sooner they get out of it, I mean, the more peace of mind everybody's going to have about a team that we still think is good and should push for that, a strong playoff position.
Well, no doubt about it. And I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about just how much hockey this team had on the schedule in the month of December. You got the day off today, and I think Rick wisely said, guys, take the day off. We'll get back at it tomorrow against the Nashville Predators. But you got a travel day, then back-to-backs against Vancouver and Seattle, travel back to Winnipeg, Tuesday against the Ottawa Senators, and then back-to-backs against Boston and Washington going into Christmas. Those are going to be really tough games, Murat. So, I mean, I really look at these next 4 games in 6 nights as something that, can either reset the course and get back to where they are, or, could completely change the thoughts on the first 3 months of the season by the time we get to Christmas break. So it will be interesting tomorrow night. Let's one other thing that Rick Bowness was pretty clear with earlier in the week, that he wasn't particularly happy with the fourth line coming out of that Washington game. Axel Johnson-Fialbi got a seat in the press box. Kevin Stenlund got the start last night coming up from the Manitoba Moose, and Carson Kuhlman got picked up off on waivers. First off, what did you think of the fourth line last night, in particular Stenlund's insertion into the lineup?
Well, hey, I thought that it was a productive game from the fourth line, and there were stretches of the game where you liked Winnipeg's fourth line and third line more than the top 2. I mean, I thought that you could count on them to generate some offensive zone time, get some opportunities. Now, of course, Mark Scheifele can take over a game, so you don't want to keep him off the ice. With Stenlund, I went back to my training camp reviews that I was writing at The Athletic, each day, who was catching eyes, all of those sorts of things, to sort of remind myself a little bit what to expect from him. And it turns out I was writing about him in the same breath as Saku Maenalanen quite a lot, in terms of these are big, clearly professionals with pro experience. You could tell a certain, like the routes they take, the moments that they're able to win battles, 50-50 situations, that, younger players, even really highly touted younger players, they don't have that kind of success at a professional camp. Well, Stenlund was right there with Maenalanen as one of my bright spots in terms of forechecking presence and just defensive responsibility as well. So no surprise that he's had a strong Moose season so far, playing big minutes in all situations, kind of the old David Gustafsson role in a way, where he was the number 1 center in a lot of different capacities for the Manitoba Moose. His promotion to the Winnipeg Jets, like you say, is part of a storyline that Rick Bowness hasn't been happy with what's happened on that fourth line recently. They've been getting scored on quite a bit. Well, that effort last night was much improved. I liked Kevin Stenlund and his ability to win pucks, play a responsible game, all those things that you want from a fourth line. You want to think that it's safe and that you may be able to generate a little bit of bonus content, I guess, in the offensive zone from time to time. And I trust Stenlund to win enough of his battles to get that done. And of course, the cherry on top for everybody, I think, in terms of the fourth line, was a pretty impressive deflection goal by Sam Gagner to break a long-standing, I think it was 18 games scoring slump. And Winnipeg needs non-zeros from its fourth line if it's going to be a deep team that goes deep this year. it definitely needs not to get beat up on like what happened against Washington the other day.
Well, speaking of zeros, our buddy Gus has a 0 in the goal column. He's been a mainstay on that fourth line, and I think has done a number of things very well that's kept him in the lineup. I couldn't help but maybe hear a little bit of a challenge from Rick Bowness to Gustafsson in particular, saying they need some scoring from the fourth line. And even yesterday, when he was asked about that line, he gave quite a bit of credit to Kevin Stenlund for the way he looked. He talked about Gagne making a difference and getting to the net. And then he said Gus was fine on left wing. What do you make of where Gus is right now, how he's been playing, and what he needs to do to maybe get a little bit more confidence from Bones?
Yeah, you know what? I like David Gustafsson's season. It's a fourth line role. It's not that pronounced, to be sure. But within what he gets, I've liked his ability to win pucks defensively. He's a really cerebral defensive player, frequently in exactly the right spot, and he's big and he has the long reach and he can break up plays when the time calls for it. He kind of reminds me in a way of a bigger Andrew Kopp from the earlier portions of his career, where it was all intelligence and hustle and those sorts of things in terms of positioning. Kopp had a defensive impact long before he started producing offense for the Winnipeg Jets. And that's sort of the timeline that I would imagine for Gustafsson. I've honestly been really quite impressed with this season. And I think it may be a little bit of support in that, as you know, Janssen Fjallby and certainly Manalanen's injured and other things like that. But as other fourth line players have come in and out of the lineup a little bit more, you know, Gustafsson was maintained on that fourth line when those changes were made. So I think more of what's happening is, like you said, the word challenge. I think Rick Bowness is, you know, trying to nudge him along in terms of what's next for him, in terms of creating a little bit. They can't just tread water or get scored on, like I say, against Washington. Gustafsson should be capable of adding from that spot. And if Bowness believes that, you know, a little bit of tough love is the way, then maybe Gustafsson can handle that and should be pushing to do more when he's out there.
Murat, he's certainly not out of sight, out of mind to Winnipeg Jet fans, but Nikolai Ehlers was in the building last night, was on the ice today, which is a great sign. Fingers crossed that it went well. I'm not sure whether you caught his interview with Sarah Orlesky, but man, he put on a brave face and spoke about the, where things are at. But man, what a challenging time for Ehlers right now. And I mean, it was quite clear. We played a couple clips at the start of this season that the biggest challenge right now really has been mental. And with an injury like this, there's not a clearly defined timeline right now. What do you make of Ehlers' situation and the challenge that he'll go through over the course of this next weeks of rehab, and then coming back into a lineup that has, well, been flourishing for the most part in his absence?
Yeah, I think first of all, when you say flourishing, I think Ehlers will be grateful for that. You know, there's an opportunity there for a team to sulk or shoot down the standings when a top winger like Ehlers is missing. And Winnipeg clearly has not done that. You've gotten some really impressive performances. You know, I didn't love Blake Wheeler's game last night, but I really liked his season. And I think that's been a key part of keeping Winnipeg's top six afloat. And then all of a sudden you have Michael Eyssimont, who we've been praising for his hard work and hustle for so long, making an impact in a top six role. I don't know that you can bank on that to last for months and months necessarily, but Winnipeg has gotten enough to handle the situation without Ehlers. But for him personally, it has to be an exceedingly difficult situation. This was the year when all of those complaints that, guys like me would have, where the one thing Winnipeg could do to improve its forward group is just adjust those time on ice sliders. Play Nikolai Ehlers like a first line winger, give him that top power play time. You're going to see dividends. Early on, it looked like Winnipeg was doing exactly that, and he was on track with points early, points throughout preseason, points in the games that he did play. Here it was for him. And to have that taken away for a bit of a nebulous injury, where a lot of guys who've come back from this type of surgery have struggled for a while, I mean, that has to be a mental grind for him. This was his moment. It was his time. And to have that taken away, and then honestly, I don't think any of us can say in that same way, like if it's a cracked bone in your whatever that a player comes back from, you can say, well, he's going to be the same guy that he was. Maybe there's some pain. Ehlers, I think we should be a little bit cautious about as he comes back from that surgery, because we've seen it happen to other players where some of the return to top form is a little bit slow.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. Fingers crossed. Hey, it was great news to see the Jets social media throw out that the guy they call Fly was on the ice today, and fingers crossed we'll see or hear positive news from his rehab and see him back in the lineup, and then Rick Bowness can figure out where he fits in and what they're going to do, and hopefully it's tough decisions because the team's winning hockey games. Murat, should be a great one tomorrow night. Thanks so much for doing this, and happy holidays to you and yours.
Hey, right on, Huss. Thanks so much.
Good stuff. There is our good friend Murat Tesh of The Athletic. Can't wait. Stephen Whyno's coming up in just a second. We'll talk OV 800 as well as his book, which we've talked about before on the show, but it's of particular interest to many of us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Hey, have to give a huge shout out and thanks to our friends at Princess Auto for their wonderful support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. Of course, great sponsors of the Bombers and Manitoba's top curlers on the Word Curling Tour, including Reed Carruthers and Team Jennifer Jones. And with the holidays here, Princess Auto, you know, is where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. 2 Winnipeg locations, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West. And you can always shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. When you're talking water here in Winnipeg and Manitoba, you're talking Culligan, family owned for over 65 years and the go-to people for all water products and services, including water softeners, filters, bottled water coolers, whole home systems, and drinking water systems, not to mention citywide water delivery services and commercial and industrial water products and solutions. Pop down and see the gang at Culligan at 1200 Sargent Avenue. Give them a buzz at 694-5180 or check out everything they can do for you and your family online at drinkculligan.com. Bomber fans, you know Canadian Club's been the official sponsor of the Bombers, and we all enjoyed a few CC and Gingers in a can at the stadium. We'll have to wait, although the schedule did come out yesterday. But when you're entertaining for the holidays, make sure you're picking up the good stuff, Canada's favorite Canadian rye, Canadian Club. And Bomber fans need to know when you pop into one of the 20 largest Manitoba liquor marts right now, look for the Jim Beam display, pick up a bottle of Jim Beam, and get a free Winnipeg Blue Bomber collector glass featuring Zach Caleros, Adam Bighill, or hometown hero Nick Dembski right now at all Manitoba liquor marts. And just before we bring in Stephen Whyno, NFL football back tomorrow. Great Thursday nighter between Seattle and the San Francisco 49ers. And if you're not making it down to the game at Canada Life, why not set up shop at a BP, NFL football, Winnipeg Jets hockey, and of course, all the great stuff on that Boston Pizza menu, wings, schooners, and more. And you can always enter to win during both NFL football and Jets hockey at your local Manitoba Boston Pizza location. All right, it's been a minute since we've had our pal Stephen Whyno, and in the time since he's been on the program, he's released his new book, Odd Man In, Hockey's Emergency Goalies and the Wildest One-Day Job in Sports. We'll talk about that. And a guy he's covered for a very long time, one Alex Ovechkin. Whyno, what's up, man? Great to talk to you again.
Great to talk to you again, too, Hostler.
We'll get to the book in a minute, but I've got to start off with Ovi. Hat trick last night. He has been sniffing the net right now. He's now at 800 goals. How long have you covered him? How many of those goals have you been on the beat covering Alex Ovechkin for?
A few hundred, probably more than the goaltenders he scored against. So 165, give or take.
What do you make of the way he's playing right now? And I mean, we have sort of saw the Caps the other night, and last week it sort of seemed like he's been a vulture for empty netters, and good on the Caps for being in a position to have the other team pull in their goalie and help out their captain. Last night, though, I mean, it seemed like he was smelling blood going into Chicago against a Chicago Blackhawks team that's basically destined for the basement, and making the most of these opportunities and doing it not once, but 3 times last night to hit the big milestone.
Yeah, and take nothing away from the empty netters. I mean, you look at Marian Host's numbers, career, Brad Marchand, obviously Wayne Gretzky. All of these guys have scored empty net goals. That's one thing. But yeah, the Capitals are playing well right now, and Alex Ovechkin is one of the reasons behind it. Even when he's not scoring, he's throwing his body around. TJ Oshie's throwing his body around. And this is one of the reasons why he's the captain of this team. He's not a rah-rah guy in the locker room, but he's one of those guys who, the way he plays, the way he hits and tries to kind of create the game or make differences in the game, It's helping the Capitals right now, and they're getting good goaltending from Charlie Lindgren. They're getting a little healthier. Nick Backstrom and Tom Wilson are on their way back soon. But Alex Ovechkin, I mean, he's on pace for another 50-goal season, which would break Wayne Gretzky's record for number of 50-goal seasons, which is quite absurd at age 37. We've never seen anything like this. And even when he has had stretches where he hasn't scored goals, he's been a difference maker for this team.
You know, a couple years ago, we were kicking around the possibility of catching Gretz for the all-time record, and I thought that, well, I mean, listen, if anyone's going to do it, it's Ovi, but we were assuming this sort of level of play year after year after year, which I thought was maybe a lot to ask. And yet you just said it, Steven. He's now on pace for another 50-goal season right now at 37. I mean, if we were making a betting line right now, I think it's far more likely that he does it than he doesn't.
It's absolutely more likely. And when he signed that contract in July of 2021 with an eye on playing 5 more years and trying to break the record, the first thing I said is we're going to know in the first 15, 20 games of the following season whether he has a real chance at it. And when he started on fire last season and was on that pace again for 40-plus goals, he doesn't get injured. I mean, this is one of those things, even at his age, he's been so durable throughout his career, and he's lost games to a pandemic, to 2 different work stoppages along the way, and still at 800, now 95 away from breaking Wayne Gretzky's number. But you're right. And the whole point is he needs to score these goals now because at some point, Father Time is going to catch up to him. Father Time is undefeated. It's going to happen to everybody at some point where you're going to have diminishing returns of how many goals he's able to score. Now, if he's able to score 40-something this year and 30-some next year, he's putting himself with 2 more years after that on his contract at really being able to approach that, and it not being as sad either, not being him stationed on the power play and playing 4th-line minutes, but being able to actually score goals at a reasonable clip that, again, he hasn't scored anything fewer than 24 in a season his entire career, and that's when he only played 45 games in the pandemic-shortened 21 season. So the math is looking more and more possible given that the pace he's scoring at this age.
You know, you mentioned his longevity, but also the fact that he never gets hurt. When you think about how much of a physical game that he plays, it's even more incredible. I mean, any ideas on what has made him the workhorse and the ability to play night after night after night?
His training regimen and everybody like in his career kind of earlier would make fun of him for he's got a beer belly or all these sort of things. But the work he always put in, Phil Kessel was always like that too. But like Phil Kessel is the Iron Man now in the NHL, and Wayne Gretzky and Alex Ovechkin has shown he plays through things. It's not necessarily that he's always healthy, but he's a durable guy who, even when he's got a back thing or a knee thing, a couple playoffs ago, he had 2 or 3 things going on at the same time. He still manages to play through them, and his 60%, 70% is better than a lot of guys' 100%. And I think that says a lot about how much he cares about playing, how much he wants to be on the ice. And he's had a few suspensions along the way, and he did have a hamstring thing that cost him a few games at the end of the season a couple of years ago. But yeah, for the physical game, you're right. He's a power forward. This is not like he's dancing around and avoiding contact. He looks for contact. He can deliver it. And look, I spoke with Mark Howe actually this morning. He's like, I think as long as Alex Ovechkin still has the passion for the game and stays healthy, he's going to break Wayne Gretzky's record. And the health part is a big asterisk for everyone, and especially as he gets to 38, 39 years old. But how do you bet against this guy at this point?
You know, I got to quickly ask you about the Caps, who we saw come in here and beat the Jets on Sunday night. You know, they've won 5 in a row. We've sort of been following all these Ovi lines and seeing all these empty netters. Then you realize that they're still in 6th in the Metropolitan, and even with the 5-game winning streak, are only 3 games above NHL 500. What have you made of? Give us a bit of a synopsis on the ups and downs and what this team has been through and where they're trending right now. Obviously, one of the hottest teams in the league.
Well, things were looking rough for a while, and there was at one point where they had almost half of the salary cap out injured. TG Oshie was out. John Carlson, Dmitry Orlov. We obviously know about Carl Hagelin, Nicholas Backstrom, and Tom Wilson being out, and that was expected. But the injuries just started to pile up so much that they kept losing a lot of close games, and it would be a different thing each time. It'd be, it's a slow start, or maybe we're not playing a full 60 minutes and that sort of thing. So the losses just started to pile up, and they really dug themselves a hole to where before this winning streak started, it looked like it was going to be a sell-off at the deadline. It looked like it was really going to be the start of kind of, I don't want to say the dark days yet, because Alex Ovechkin is still around and there's still a lot of talent on his team. But at some point, this is a very old team, and you're going to need to kind of infuse it with youth and all of that. But the Capitals know how to win. One of the things about being a veteran team is they have figured out a recipe of how to win, even after losing Darcy Kemper injury, still not having Backstrom and Wilson in the lineup. I think a little bit kind of buoyed by them skating and knowing that a return is on the precipice, if not this weekend, but in the next few weeks, that this is a team that has figured out how to win. Peter Laviolette's obviously a very good coach. And when you have your top-end talent, Alex Ovechkin, John Carlson, Evgeny Kuznetsov producing, this team can win and challenge for a playoff spot.
You know, I've got to ask you about this, you know, in today's current climate. I mean, we all know what's happening over in Russia and Ukraine. We know how close Vladimir Putin has been to Ovechkin and how he is been used at times for being the symbol of Russian greatness when it comes to hockey. How different has this season been for Ovechkin and for the Capitals with all the Russians on it, considering what's happening overseas?
It hasn't been really much different. And obviously it was brought up last spring, in late February, early March, when the invasion began. Alex Ovechkin addressed it. And because he has been a vocal Vladimir Putin supporter in the past, that it kind of had to address it. What is different for me this year is it hasn't really come up, and except when Vladimir Putin kind of doubled down on the war, Alex Ovechkin was asked about it. He has generally stayed out of Instagram and kind of social media things for that very reason. What's different for Alex Ovechkin this season is his family's here. And he was doing all this last year with his wife and two sons in Moscow still. And so he's passing these guys and setting these milestones and scoring all these goals. And he couldn't have his family there with him. It's different now. They got back to the United States. They are around with him now. I think from a personal standpoint, that's the biggest thing going on for Alex Ovechkin differently from last season.
All right, Stephen Whyno is with us now. We always know Whyno covering the NHL for the AP and sometimes getting into the Washington Commanders room, which I saw you there. But you've also been working on a book, Odd Man in Hockey's Emergency Goalies and the Wildest One-Day Job in Sports. I mean, covering hockey the way we do, there's nothing more entertaining than great e-bug stories. But tell us a little bit about where the idea came to put this together and what it was like telling these stories.
Incredibly wacky. I mean, this happened New Year's Eve 2016 when George Alves, the Carolina equipment manager, went into a game for 7.8 seconds. One of my editors came to me and said, "This is the weirdest thing in sports. Like, can you do a story about it?" And I was like, "Sure." And that was just from a 7-second cameo. So I got a chance to talk to some of the old school folks who had done this, not even going into a game, just the near misses, the dressing for warmups, being on the bench, just being in the locker room, being able to celebrate a win. So I knew all these stories and was fortunate to win an award for it. And then a pandemic hits, and I'm sitting around during a vacation. I'm like, maybe this is more than just, now that you had guys going into games, Scott Foster had happened, David Ayres had happened, like maybe this is more than just a story. Maybe this is a book, and kind of having all that history. I was at the David Ayres game in the minors when he backed up Jonathan Bernier for the Toronto Marlies. So I knew David Ayres previously. And so it was fun to be able to kind of tell these guys stories, because it's the weirdest, stupidest thing in sports. It's wonderful. Don't get me wrong, guys. But the fact that Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers get hurt, there's not a Division III quarterback sitting there ready to come into the game from the stands. It's the craziest thing. And it was fun to be able to tell the different stories along the way beyond just the David Ayres and Scott Foster, who a lot of people already know.
Well, that being said, the Ayres story is, I mean, it is an all-time sports story. And listen, for those of us that like to poke fun at our friends that support the blue and white of the Toronto Maple Leafs, it has been the gift that we'll keep on giving forever. But that one does, in a lot of ways, stand out because how much he played and the fact that he was the Zamboni driver. I mean, you can't even make this stuff up.
It's unbelievable. And especially David Ayres had driven in Zamboni and Mattamy in Toronto, that he had practiced with the Marlies and the Maple Leafs and taken shots from a lot of these guys. And then all of a sudden, instead of, and Rod Brindamore said this and when we talked about it later, and even then, he's like, well, we're in Toronto. Of course, there's going to be some guy with junior hockey experience and all that. So he sees this 5'8", 42-year-old goalie coming out, and you can see the look on Rod Brindamore's face, like, we're going to get waxed right now. Like, what are we doing here? And then to have him come in, give up the first 2 goals, everybody around the NHL is freaking the heck out because they're thinking, oh, the Leafs are going to get an easy win out of this. And then for him to play the way he played, and the Hurricanes to play maybe the best regular season game of hockey in the modern era, maybe ever played in front of him on Hockey Night in Canada, in the center of the hockey universe, and all of that. And it was just, you couldn't have asked for a better story. And it's becoming a movie, apparently. Disney's got the rights or whatever to make this into a movie. It really is a storybook thing.
The 15 minutes aren't quite up yet for David Ehlers. Jet fans remember the Scott Foster game. What do you remember about that? And now, removed from it, when you talk to these guys, like a guy like Foster, I mean, it's such a crazy story in itself. How does he look back at his brush of fame here as an NHLer?
It's funny because I was actually worried Scott Foster wasn't going to talk because he had his night, beat the Jets, made his 7 saves, and then just didn't want to do any more media. He was just like, I'm done now. I don't want to do any more interviews. I had my thing, and he kind of wanted to put it in a box. And so it was a few years later. I mean, that game was March 29th, 2018, and I approached him somewhere in the spring of 2021. He's like, I think I'm just past the point of like being out of practice I kind of want to tell the story again without having my rehearsed sort of speech about it. So we actually sat at a brewery outside of Chicago near his house and put the recorder down and had some beers, and he just told me everything. And so those were the moments of kind of putting the book together, of Scott Foster telling a story just about his day of just literally dropping his kids off at school, driving into work, coming back, having a fight with his wife, and then going into an NHL game. Just a normal day as an accountant and a husband and a father. And all of a sudden, he's playing for the Chicago Blackhawks. And like, I still remember him at the end of that game, just the look at the end where he just shrugs, like, I guess we just won an NHL game. And that's a part of his life now. It's unreal.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Jets were part of that story as well, and everyone had a good laugh about it. But, I mean, another legendary one. Those are the guys that come to mind first. Obviously, you go through it all in the book, but who was a guy that our listeners and viewers won't know about that you really enjoyed telling the story of?
You're good. They're going to know, you guys are going to know the name, but my favorite story of the entire book is, because not a whole lot of people realize it, Carter Hutton in 2010 dressed as an e-bug with the Flyers, backed up Ryan Boucher, who was kind enough to write the forward for this as well. But he dressed the year the Flyers went to the final. They went through 9 goalies, started 7 during the year, had all these injuries. So Carter Hutton was just this college kid on a tryout for the Flyers minor league team in the AHL, and he needed to dress for a game. It just happened to be Jerseys Off Your Back Fan Appreciation Night. So he's thinking like, oh, great, some fans getting Chris Pronger and some poor loser's getting my jersey. Well, that loser was a Flyers season ticket holder who on the drive home was like, well, why do I need this jersey? Like, this kid's going to appreciate it more. And he sent it to the Flyers. Flyers got it to Carter Hutton. Carter framed the jersey, his first NHL jersey, for his parents. It's still hanging in their house in Thunder Bay. And then he goes on to have a 10-year NHL career, almost like the e-bug who got the job done and kind of lived out the dream from dressing in a game to having the career.
You know what? This is perfect timing to get you on, because I'm seeing a lot of people in the chat fired up for the book and say they're going to pick it up for the holidays. I guess Amazon probably the best place to get it.
If you can find me, I'm literally selling books out of my trunk. If you're not near me, yes, Amazon, and it's on triumphbooks.com as well. And I have a link to that on my Twitter account.
Excellent. It's at Whyno on Twitter. Remo can throw that into the chat. Hockey's Emergency Goalies, Odd Man In. The book by our friend Stephen Whyno. And hey, before I go, I did see you were down with the Commanders. Left hand up. What a run for this team right now. And Taylor Heineke, huge game coming up this week off the bye against the team they just tied, division rival New York Giants.
Huge game, and I'll tell you this, I'm actually sitting outside the room. We just spoke with Taylor Heineke a few minutes ago, and I asked him, like, how badly do you not want to tie these guys again? He's like, I actually was watching the big UFC fight, and I saw the main event end in a tie, and it's like, imagine getting beat up for 25 minutes and ending in a tie? Like, nobody wants that. And so, the energy around here is incredible. The Commanders are 4.5-point favorites going into this game. There's legitimate playoff buzz in Washington about a winning team for the first time in years. And I got to say, with a guy like Taylor Heineke, who's drinking Busch Lights and eating pizza, it's like a regular guy being a quarterback in the NFL, basically the opposite of Tom Brady. And it's been a lot of fun around here.
He's like the e-bug of the NFL.
The e-bug, he literally was sitting on his sister's couch out of the league, taking online college classes, this time 2 years ago. and now he is the starting quarterback for a team that could be going to the playoffs.
Well, and it sure seems like they love this guy. I mean, I don't want to throw any shade at Carson Wentz, but he's had some ups and downs in his stops. You guys never going to be, in the MVP race, but there's something about the spirit he brings to the team that people just rally around. And it really has been the turning point, although we can look at analytics and the numbers and they don't jump out at you, but the number that does is in the win column.
Yeah, and he's really a popular teammate, but also Ron Rivera has said there's an underdog mentality about him. The way he plays, and he has said this, and Terry McLaurin said this, like every game is his last game in the NFL. And just the way he plays like that, he is not a prototypical size or strength or any of those things, but he is a human being who is a leader, and I think a lot of teammates and people and coaches and fans rally around that.
Steven, thanks so much for doing this, man. Have a great holiday season and cannot wait to get into the book. And I know a lot of our Winnipeg Sports Talk listeners are going to be jumping to pick it up just in time for the 25th.
You as well. Have a good holiday.
Thanks so much. At Whyno on Twitter, there's our pal Steven Whyno. And of course, the book is out, Odd Man In. And obviously a great friend of ours, a longtime guest of the program, both in our previous home and here. And doing more than just covering the Caps in the NHL and ready for that big NFC East game between the Giants and Commanders, of course, who I think in some ways both helped their cause with that tie. Not good for the other teams chasing them right now in the NFL. All right, Marbles, registration is open. Great to see everybody here. Hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and put in !Marbles. We'll fire that up in just a few minutes. In the meantime, a big happy holidays and shout out to our friends at the Nick and Nicky DQ group. 4 locations in Winnipeg and southern Manitoba. The DQ in Niverville, DQ Northgate, DQ Polo Park, DQ St. Anne's. Nick and Nicky have been with us since day one here on WST. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of traditional desserts to have around the holidays. None of them are as good as a DQ ice cream cake. So why don't you get something festive for the family coming up this holidays? Give Nick and Nicky a buzz. Pop by any of the 4 locations, or you can hit them up on Instagram at DQ Manitoba. Let them know what you're looking for, how big of a cake you want, any customization to it, and they'll get it ready for you for a quick and easy pickup at any of the 4 Nick and Nicky DQs. And while you're there, check out those stack burgers. Unbelievable. Great new buns and sauces and more. One of my absolute favorites in the fast food game. Big shout out to Nick and Nicky. And hey, with the holidays here, speaking of entertaining, Little Brown Jug is what you want to be including in all of your holiday gatherings. And heck, speaking of gathering, why don't you get together at Little Brown Jug, the brewery and tap room. Beautiful spot to meet friends for a few down on William Avenue in the Exchange, right by the Red River campus. And while you're there, you can try all the beers. You can pick up the beers to go home. You can get beautiful Little Brown Jug glassware if you want for a gift, and tons of great merchandise as well. If you can make it down, though, Little Brown Jug will deliver citywide. Order online at littlebrownjug.ca. And if you're at your local beer store, check out the Little Brown Jug section. And fine bars and restaurants all around the city will be pouring their flagship brand 1919 on tap as well. All right. Let's get Remo in here. Oh, one more plug for you folks. And I guess, Remo, we talked about this yesterday. We played the Chris Jericho promo. But AEW is coming to town. And there you go, folks. We're doing you a solid. The pre-sale is tomorrow at 10 a.m. The code you need is TS1XWC. So if you're listening on the podcast, again, pre-sale, Ticketmaster, 10 a.m. tomorrow, TS1XWC. AEW pre-sale. Remo, I imagine that is going to be a hot ticket, and the timing of the announcement of the show absolutely perfect, because we know what a big wrestling town Winnipeg is. We know how huge of stars Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho are. And it's been a long time since either of those guys were in town. And for them to be, in a lot of ways, the faces of AEW coming here in the new year, this is going to be one of the biggest and coolest AEW events ever, I would say. And I can't wait to be there.
Yeah, Winnipeg has always supported professional wrestling. We had a sold-out crowd here, SmackDown, and with AEW and the biggest stars in the in the promotion being from Winnipeg, I would imagine some serious buzz here on March 14 at Canada Life Center. So pretty cool. It's going to be awesome.
I, of course, should also include Don Callis in that list of Winnipeg talent with AEW. The man we remember as the Natural or the Jackal from back in the day. Joey Panks has just said, need to get Don Callis on the show. Hopefully I will. I did actually get a text yesterday from one Ezra Ginsburg of Illegal Curve who said that he just saw Don Callis at Niagara Sev.
Yeah, he got big time.
He got big time by him. He basically got the old barely look. Hey, I'm on the phone right now with the kids.
I
as
think
he says, he's still down with Don Callis, though.
I think Don Callis was just doing kayfabe there.
Could very well be.
He's staying in character for all you non-wrestling fans.
So even if you're a borderline wrestling fan or you just haven't been to an event like this, get there for AEW. It is going to be so cool to see the Winnipeg guys come back. Certainly they'll be headlining and be the star of the show, but the entire operation's really cool, and it'll be on TSN2 tonight as well with their weekly Dynamite show. And this is a special Dynamite on a Tuesday, March 14th, right here in Winnipeg. Cannot wait for it. Use that pre-sale code tomorrow and get your tickets just in time for the holidays. All right, before we do marbles, Reem, I know we just talked about Ovi. I know you've got some takes on Ovi getting to 800. By the way, shout out to our guy Chris Meany. Called the Ovi hat trick last night at 35-1. What a call. And man, he was smelling blood going into Chicago and got it done.
Yeah, I wish I'm having some major FOMO that I didn't get in on that. I saw him tweet it out. I was like, yeah, I guess that could happen, and I didn't really act on it at all. And then I'm watching the game. Someone's texting me after the Jets game. He's got 2. I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll turn it on. Then I turn it on, and he scores the goal, and it may have been one of the record-setting goal calls of all time with Steve Levy on ESPN, but it was the debut game in the booth for legends Mark Messier and Chris Chelios, and I really don't want to dump on those guys because, I mean, they're some of the greatest players of all time, but really just shat all over the goal call and just showed their inexperience in the booth in an historic hockey moment.
Dusty, as a play-by-play guy, said that he would have been shooting a stink eye over the booth if that had happened. Again, I'm not sure whether those guys know what they're doing, what they're supposed to be doing. No, it was very clear. But it was somewhat unfortunate because Steve Levy, I mean, has done such an amazing job calling so many sports, and this was such a big goal. And Chelios, there it is. Like basically in the middle of the call. It was a cluster, you know what.
Yeah, the radio call, I tweeted it out it was John Walton on the radio, does a really good job. I'm into like calls for historic moments, so we were talking about it, but the TV, I mean, the whole broadcast was, I mean, it's super cool. I was having Messier and Chelios in the booth, but I think they thought it was like the Manning cast or something where you can just say whatever you want rather than an actual hockey broadcast.
Now, speaking of, France is up 2-0. Nice. Oh, man, that's going to be a great final. Speaking of Ovechkin, just before we get to marbles, I don't know why you had to do this, but
it got okay. Yeah,
folks, we basically get up this morning. We're talking about the show, and we're on before we hooked up with Trevor, and I hear Dennis Bayak calling in the background. I'm like, what are you doing? Of course, Ovi gets 800. Remo starts to think about all the goals that he's scored against Winnipeg Jets over the course of the years and goes back to that horrendous 2-day stretch with the back-to-back games in the good old Southeast Division where the Capitals piled it on the Jets 10-1 over the course of 2 games. Jets went into that in first place, and it really was the start of a spiral that left them out by the time everything finished up.
Okay, so here's a graphic that the NHL put out on Instagram. This is how this came about, it has every team or franchise that he scored his 800 goals against. Number 1 is the Jets at 51. Now, a majority of those are from Atlanta, but we were in the Southeast Division for a couple years, including the lockout-shortened 2012-2013 season where they had a back-to-back on a Friday, Saturday in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
And you thought the Jets had a real shot at the playoffs here because that division was not good, and the Caps rolled in and outscored them 10-1 in 2 nights, and Ovechkin had 3 goals and a couple more assists. And I like Payne Hustler, so I went and watched all of his goals and cut it into a highlight reel on my Twitter. You know how many, I'm like, this is such a great idea. I'm going to tweet out Ovechkin's goals against the Jets on a 2-night stretch.
Hopefully you're getting ratioed.
0 likes, 0 retweets, 0 comments. No one cares. Except for me. I like Payne. I'll tweet out the Kevin Hayes saving the goal on himself in Game 5 all the time.
There. Listen, I know the Jets have lost 2 games. We need to lighten it up a little bit. Get ready for this big game tomorrow on the program. Anyways, at Remis, if you want to go down that memory lane. It was great to see Claude Noel on the bench in those clips. And listen, I think back to that season and the opportunity that was there for the Jets. And I mean, that 2-game back-to-back series against Washington stands out as an absolute killer. And the other game, if you recall, Remo, was against the Carolina Hurricanes. Mm-hmm. And that was when the fans decided they would just pick a player and boo the hell out of them all night. Well, Eric Stahl was the guy that the fans foolishly decided to boo all night. He was very clearly irked by it, scored 2 goals and let the fans know it, and essentially stuck it up you-know-what. And I think that game not only contributed to the Jets falling out of their position in the standings, but in a lot of ways was a cautionary tale to fans about the booing of star players. And I think that started the decline of that at Canada Life Center.
The crowd hasn't been the same since at Canada Life Center since Eric Stahl
He broke us. He broke us.
He broke. Yeah, it was. You had fun, and then after that, it just hasn't been as fun.
All right, folks. Last call for marbles. Marbles, everybody. Remo, you want to close that up, and
sure.
We can get everything ready. Listen, I know T. Konopali's talking about this. We want Bauer. Tyrell Bauer, the Moose, last night got in a scrap. He's a pretty big dude, 6'3". He was giving up 4 inches to this monster on Calgary who came in at 6'7". It is an absolute all-time tilt. We've heard a lot about how tough this kid is coming from the Western Hockey League and now being a first-year member of the Manitoba Moose playing pro. That was just an absolutely jaw-dropping scrap last night. And I know fighting's not a real big part of the National Hockey League, but man, it sure is nice to have a guy that can hang like that. And I think he opened a lot of eyes last night with that performance and standing up against a guy who literally 6'7", towered over him.
This is an old-time hockey scrap. Reminds me of some of the ones Ty Domi used to be in, arms flailing around. I will say, when I watch, fighting in hockey these days, there's not a lot of area for your fist to connect on a guy's face. You got a helmet. You got a visor. You got to really make sure it's like up in there because I feel like you're more likely to hurt your own hand. You're more likely to hurt your own hand than to hurt the other guy in a hockey fight. That's just me. But hey, I'm not going to turn away from a good scrap. Here I am saying fighting in hockey so dumb. It just doesn't affect the game at all. Then 2 guys start chucking knucks, and you're like, oh man, this is awesome. Yeah. Although I did have a conflicted moment as a father. I took my son to a Moose game. He's 3 years old, and all of a sudden, guys just started fighting, and I had to have a dad moment where
Did he love it?
He didn't care about the hockey game at all.
What about the fight? Like that will attract anyone's attention, whether you're 3 years old or 83.
Yeah, I don't think he had an opinion on the fight, but I was like, yeah, they're fighting right now, but it hasn't crept into his regular routine. I'm happy.
Hey, by the way, if people are looking for this fight, Dave Manuk tweeted it out. So if you go to IC Dave 13 or 14 hours ago, I believe he's got Fink's call of it. Definitely something to take a look at if you like that sort of thing. You will not see very many better fights in professional hockey this year, certainly in the AHL or NHL, than the one with Moose defenseman Tyrell Bauer last night. All right, Remo, well, you get this ready. Pretty slow night tonight in the National Hockey League after the 12-game slate yesterday. Only 3 games. We have Les Canadiens at the Ottawa Senators. The Sens are minus 200 favorites, and I don't get this. They've been so inconsistent so far this season. The Habs have a better record. Cole Caulfield is playing right now. To me, there's value on the Habs. I'm not sure whether they'll win, but you certainly wouldn't see me laying minus 200 on the Senators at home the way they've been up and down so far this year. They have won 2 in a row. I don't think they have a 3-game winning streak since the beginning of the season. So wouldn't it all be surprised if the Habs maybe snuck one in? Of course, they just did the same thing to the Calgary Flames in their last matchup. Of course, the Flames now back at home taking on the Vancouver Canucks. There's lots going on around the Vancouver Canucks. Bo Horvat, still the captain, potentially could be moved. How good would he look in a Jet uniform? Although I'm not sure what the cost would be to acquire said Bo Horvat. Minus 181 for the Flames tonight, though. Canucks plus 153. And if you do like the Flames on the puck line, which I actually do, I think they, after dropping points in Toronto and Montreal, I think you get a big performance from old Daryl Sutter's squad. Plus 138 on that puck line. And then the Red Wings and Wild. Wild are a huge favorite, minus 256. We hit this in the lock shop earlier today. Could go with the puck line, minus 1.5, although Ville Husso has been so good. Going to lean to the Wild in regulation today at minus 154. So just 3 games tonight. Tomorrow, we've got a pretty good Thursday nighter in the National Football League. Seahawks and 49ers in Seattle. Seahawks a 3-point home dog against the Niners, who are hoping Mr. Irrelevant himself, Brock Purdy, who starred in their win last week against Tampa, will be able to go for tomorrow night's kickoff. Of course, the World Cup final is set now with France beating Morocco this afternoon. Argentina and France, I'm not sure. Is it already up?
No, it's not there.
It's not quite up. So we'll see what happens with that. I would imagine. I think France will probably be a slight favorite in that, but certainly Messi, the sentimental favorite by fans around the world right now. Cannot wait for that. That is going to be, I believe, a 9 a.m. start coming up on Saturday. So we'll buckle up for that one. Should be phenomenal. Oh, we can bet. They've got the bet on who will be the referee of the final match. I wish I knew more about the officials to give a good, but Simon Marcinak of Poland is the favorite right now at minus 200. Ismail Elfath of USA at 4-1. Danny McKell at 8-1, and a bunch of other World Cup refs that I've never heard of, all available. That just goes to show the breadth of things that you can bet on when it comes to the World Cup over at Coolbet. Hey, if you haven't played there before, use the promo code WST when making your first deposit. We'll double it, 100% bonus, up to $200 using the promo code WST over at coolbet.com. All right, Reem, let's drop some marbles for our friends at Consolidated Supply. And again, I'm not sure if you're ready to drop it right now, but we certainly have. One of the greatest things about the 12 Days of Marbles has been Tristan Rivers Music, who qualified yesterday with the second place marble, has also been delivering some incredible musical treats for our marbles theme here on WST.
Yeah, we got another one coming up today. I'm about to put in the entries. We've got a lot of people in chat. Probably just play this Tyrell Bauer fight.
For sure. If people want to do it, let's get the audio if you can as well up. So if people are listening right now, ask and ye shall receive. This was Tyrell Bauer battling a monster last night in the Moose Calgary game.
Now they'll tie up and the fists start flying. Klepka with the size advantage on Bauer. He gets a couple of shots in. Bauer gets one away. Klepka going over the top, getting the better of this one so far, but Bauer not ready to concede. Now he's throwing haymakers. Bauer unloading now, a couple of good shots in. Gets another one away. Another one over top. Another one, and another, as Bauer starts to tee off. Got inside, there's an uppercut and another swing. They just keep on going. Bauer goes over the top. Klepka wants one more. A haymaker from Bauer. Goes up under top. Klepka looks like he's had enough. There's a quick jab now. Another tee off from Bauer. Tyrell Bauer.
Oh, that is a heavyweight tilt. Bauer, absolutely no fear. We heard all about that, him joining the Jets organization this year. Certainly made some fans last night, and have a feeling his teammates probably going, that was unbelievable. Hey, you love to have a guy like that on your team with no fear. You don't see those very often. That was a world-class tilt. Hey, one other announcement I need to make, and I didn't catch this until the end of the program yesterday. Appreciate everyone that pointed it out in chat. But we actually had a tie down to the 1,000th of a second yesterday. Ross Ransby was noted as the third place marble, but if you look closer, Jeff Johnson also had the exact same time, right down to the 1,000th of a second. So the only right thing to do is add Jeff Johnson to the mix. So due to unforeseen and unprecedented circumstances, we actually have 4 qualifiers from yesterday. So Jeff, send us an email, winnipegsportstalk@gmail.com. Make sure we've got your...
What happened? My computer, too many... Oh, you're done. Too many things happened. Uh-oh. 1 sec, we'll come back.
Can you talk or? Okay, I can't hear you. No, I cannot hear you. No. Okay, now I can hear you. Okay, perfect. Okay, can we get back here? Okay. Okay, we gotta. All right. Apologies for. You know what? The marbles are. They blew up the computer momentarily. I do think that Remis has things back together, and we will look to do our big marble race. A lot of people popping by at the end of the show. Awesome. We appreciate it. Folks, make sure you hit the red subscribe button and hit that thumbs up to make sure you're eligible to win. And if you have missed the previous races, we are qualifying people for our championship marbles race in our Consolidated Supply Marbles Tournament of Champions. Consolidated Supply has given us a pair of Blue Bomber 2023 season tickets to give away. And those seats will be given away on December 30th. But to get in that marble race, you got to be top 3 in one of our qualifying races. And one is coming up right away. Reem, what's the story? Are we back and ready to go?
We're back. We have 215 marbles in this race.
Woo!
So what happened was, I had probably like 40 tabs open, and then I opened the marble game and it broke my computer. So that's basically what just happened.
CTO, send yourself a message. Maybe keep the tabs under 40. That's for sure.
Yeah, I have a lot of tabs open. That's me. I'm a big tab guy. At least I knew what the problem was. I wasn't freaking out at all. I just had to wait.
Yes, well, everyone else was. What's going on with the marble race? Maybe it was Tyrell Bauer. The fight blew up the computer. All right, anyways, we've made people wait long enough. Let's get to it. Marble race. And as I said, we teased another new version of the marble race song from one of yesterday's qualifiers, the one and only Tristan Rivers music. Can we drop that now, Reem?
It's Friday, another week of work's gone by.
I can't hear this.
You deserve to treat yourself, maybe an ice cream cake or a bottle of rye. From the whole day intellect you can't deny. Why use effort even for pleasure? You find luck to try. It's time to do a marble race. No to separate and best to worst. Marble race. Just like marbles with the punctuation first. Marble race. Don't spare you will suffer rolling straight. Marble race. Get to your mark before it's too late. Yeah, set go.
All right. Well, that's it. Hustler, I know you couldn't hear it, but everyone else could. I don't know, my computer.
Okay, perfect. I'll go back and listen on the replay. Yes, technical difficulties be damned. The computer's back up. The marbles are ready to go. Bloodbath yesterday in the dojo with only 77 marbles finishing. Where are we going with today's qualifying race, Michael Remis?
Hold on, I'm reading all the comments. Yeah, that was Metallica for anyone who could tell. And someone says I need more RAM. That's possible. I do have fiber. Anyways, but which one are we doing? Let me pull it up here. What do we got? Are we going back to Cosmic Chaos, or are we doing a new one?
Well, we're not doing the dojo today. That is for sure.
Yeah, we started with twists and turns.
What about the funnel?
Yeah, the funnel sounds solid. We'll go there.
Let's do the funnel. So again, thanks to Consolidated Supply for making this all happen. Shout out to everyone joining us at the end of the show. And again, apologize for the 40 tab related disaster that happened just before. But good news, we're back. 217 marbles in. The top three, barring another tie to the 100th of the second for third place, will qualify for the championship race December 30th. If you're one of the top three, we'll remind you at the end, but send us an email, winnipegsportstalk@gmail.com, so we've got your contact info for the big final race. All right, we had Tristan Rivers rock out. We had him qualify yesterday. Everyone's in. Good luck. Be one of those top three. Let's get him going in the funnel right now with WST Marbles. Let's go. All right. I can actually read the numbers way better now. I normally can't hear him. I don't know what you did, but anyways, it's good. Slurp Whirple. Looks like Slurp Whirple is going to get down this funnel first. That's a nice lead for Slurp. No one else really coming close. All right, we've got a couple more coming down. Winnipeg's Broken Zamboni. Sean Reynolds brooding pessimism in the mix. JJW. But right now, it's Slurp Whirple and then everybody else. We'll see whether Slurp can hang on to this lead. Beer Me, BA Split, and Winnipeg's Broken Zamboni right now. Although it does seem like the pack is catching up a little bit to Slurp Whirple, getting into another loop-de-loop here. Winnipeg's Broken Zamboni and Beer Me seemingly in second place. BA right there, though, as well. Neil McIntyre Brennan and Danny, Doug Phil in the mix as well. But it's all Slurp Wurple right now. But the good thing is we are talking about, whoa, Slurp Wurple almost went off the, holy smokes. I think he actually did fall out and then came back in. Well, Slurp Wurple and Winnipeg's Broken Zamboni in front right now. Neil McIntyre and Binaural. Oh, we've got some eliminations. Dallas Pauls, Keith Bartell, Daryl Morosky just got whacked. Peppermint Patty looking good right now. Actually in first place right now, I believe. Wouldn't that be something? Cord Kicker and Smokes Speed Run Corner. Slurp Wurple still looking good, but Peppermint Patty is in first place. Cord Kicker is in second. And Smokes Speed Run Corner looking good. It's all Peppermint Patty, though. Peppermint Patty coming in comfortably into the winner's circle. Cord Kicker as well. And Smokes Speed Run Corner, I think you're going to get it. Now, Slurp Wurple, who had the lead the entire time, came in right at the end. We're going to need to check the times just to make sure at the end. But we definitely know Peppermint Patty's in. Cord Kicker is in. And Smokes Speed Run Corner. All the rest of the marbles popping in. You know what? That actually is a really good one, Remo. Not a ton of eliminations, and we actually did see some moves from... Once you get in those funnels, you're not necessarily guaranteed of getting out at the same time as when you came in.
That was pretty wild. A Slurp Wurple had the big lead and lost it and almost made it into third. So that was a pretty good track, the funnel.
Yeah, well, remember that one. That could potentially be a finals track, to be honest. The SMA... taking a little bit of time to get through. All right, let's see the final results. Let's make sure that there wasn't a tie for third again like there was yesterday. There we go. Yeah, Slurp Wurple just taken out by, man, about two tenths of a second or so. So Peppermint Patty, comfortable win. Nice work, Patty. 7 seconds over Cord Kicker. But Cord Kicker, Smoke Speedrun Corner, you guys send us an email at winnipegsportstalk@gmail.com. So we've got your information, and you're booked December 30th right here at the championship race for the Winnipeg Sports Talk Marbles Tournament of Champions for Bomber season tickets, courtesy of our friends at Consolidated Supply. All in all, great race. We'll remember that track, the funnel, for a little bit later on, Reem. And tomorrow we're right back at it, getting ready for the Jets and the Nashville Predators. And the Jets will look to avoid their first 3-game losing streak of the entire week, or the entire season, and try and salvage something out of this 3-game homestand that unfortunately has started with 2 losses in reg.
Yeah, you know, Nashville coming off a big whooping they got last night to Edmonton. I feel like their season's been a step back from last year. I think that maybe they caught lightning in a bottle with all their guys having career years. I'm looking forward. It's always a good game with Jets and Preds, and the Jets, big one for them, trying to get back on track before they head for the big West Coast trip. So that should be fun tomorrow.
No doubt about it. All right. Anyways, congratulations to our winners today. Thanks to everyone for being with us. Thanks to Whyno. Great stuff with Trevor Kidd. If you missed it, check it out, especially Trevor's injury stories at the end of his segment. And, of course, Murat of The Athletic as well. Big show tomorrow. Getting ready for Jets and Preds. We'll be all over it. Make sure to join us at 1 p.m. And, again, if you're listening on the podcast later on, try and pop into the YouTube stream around 2:45 when we open up registration to get in to tomorrow's marble race. And sorry about the technical difficulties. We'll get the CTO to close a few more tabs tomorrow and be a bit more ready for marbles. Have a great night, everyone. Enjoy it. We'll be back tomorrow getting ready for Jets and Preds tomorrow on Winnipeg Sports Talk.
Oh, my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.